Welcome to the November 27th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Sheila Gurry. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically. I don't believe we have anyone. Oh, Councillor Gesselbrecht is joining us electronically today. Welcome. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. There are no late items today.
Thank you. May I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda? Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Mayor Krogh. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. And may I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated? Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you very much. The first item today is agenda planning for upcoming topics and initiatives to be introduced by Sheila Gurry, Director of Legislative Services.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. So on your agenda package is a list of the upcoming topics and initiatives for GPC, as well as we did add in the December 4th e-town hall, just because it is an upcoming special initiative that will be happening starting at 7 with a financial introduction by Ms. Mercer and Mr. Lindsay, and then we'll get the community feedback for the e-town hall. So that's December 4th. Also noted on the upcoming topics and initiatives is today's agenda on what has been planned for the GPC and the upcoming meeting on December the 11th. So on December the 11th, we have AVICC resolutions because the deadline for those resolutions by council are set to happen in January. So on December 11th, we'll have a discussion with you at the committee level to see what, if any, resolutions you're looking to bring forward to AVICC, which will then be forwarded to UBCM. We also have Dr. Julian Summers and Serena Claver coming. They are presentations that Council has wished to have present, so they are coming to the December 11th GPC meeting. So it's probably going to be a quick meeting, but with the presenters scheduled, we feel it best to keep this on our schedule and for you to be able to hear from them. Then in the new year, the calendars will be coming to your December 4th council meeting for your approval for the 2024 calendar season for GPCs as well as council, finance and audit, etc. And in the first quarter of 2024, we're looking at bringing the monitoring strategy for the integrated action plans, as well as the committees, monitoring committees and or panels that we will be looking at presenting to you to see if you're interested in those in the first quarter, as well as some development approval process updates will be coming in the first quarter of 2024 as well. And now, Madam Chair, this would be the time for any members of council that wish to add additional items and have a motion for them to be added to the list. I believe Councillor Manley has one that he would like to have added as an upcoming initiative, so he can speak to that and then we'll get a motion for it.
Thank you. In order, I have Councillor Hemmens, Councillor Manley, and Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. A question through you to staff and possibly to my colleagues at the table. I recall Dr. Julian Summers being floated as a presenter. I'm curious what outcomes we're looking for with this discussion. Is this to listen to research? Is this to have a dialogue about harm reduction? What are we, I get the Nanaimo Community Action Team, they're working in Nanaimo, probably an update from them, but I'm curious about Dr. Summers, what we're hoping for.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer that question, all of the above, everything that you mentioned. Dr. Summers has done quite a bit of work in the Vancouver area. There are some successes, and they'd like to talk to us about what they have found that's working and give us some possible ideas about how to move forward, particularly in the difficult issues that we face with some of our addiction, homelessness issues. And so that was why it was brought. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Chair. There's actually two items I'd like to propose. And one is to bring Dave Whitty in to talk about his research on housing first and homelessness. He's done a lot of work in Europe, and he would like to be able to do a presentation to council about that. And the second item, I'd like to do a deep dive on the Operations Center. I think that there's a lot of people in the community that don't understand what that project involves, and I know there's been some email back and forth. Councillors have gone and done the tour of the facility, so we've heard firsthand about what those needs are. And you know, when some of the email communication we've had, I've had questions that have been answered by staff, but I think it's really important for the public to hear that, and I think that having a larger discussion about all of the things that the Operations Center involves. It's a large project, it's very expensive, and there's concerns from the public that don't seem to understand what it's all about, or why this is critical infrastructure that's needed in the community.
So, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor Manley, if you could move the first item and then have it seconded and added, and then the second, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure, I'd like to move that we invite Dave Whitty to come to a GPC meeting to discuss his studies on housing first in Europe and solutions here in Nanaimo.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. Sorry.
No further discussion?
Sorry, Ms. Gurry?
I was just going to see if there was any discussion, and if not, yes, the vote is
Okay.
correct.
All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
And then I'd like to move that we have a GPC that's focused on the Operations Center and the needs of this critical infrastructure in the community, so we can have a discussion about it and more information that we can bring forward.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. Any discussion? Councillor Armstrong?
Oh, I'm on, sorry. Thank you. I think something that we should include in that is to show just how much work has already been done by the city. The fact that we've had this to us for 2 years. There's been many council meetings on it. There was an open house, because I think people don't realize all the stuff that did happen. It's been advertised. I think people are now starting to become involved because it's going to have an impact on their taxation. But I think it's really important that they do see all the efforts that the city did put in to try and communicate. And I'll support it, because I think it's something that really has got the public's attention, and I don't think they realize how critical it is to get that building rebuilt. Thank you.
I'm going to go now to Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm on the fence on this one because it has been presented to us a number of times, and I would hate to see staff just do another presentation because people haven't seen the previous ones, and I wonder if there's no new additional information. Perhaps an alternative is we just kind of front all of those presentations that have come our way to the public somehow, maybe through the weekly newsletter. I'm aware that the GPC is really a place, in my mind, to have really deep conversations as council on big kind of challenges, and I know that the Nanaimo Operations Center has risen as a really big challenge recently, but I don't think we've changed any plans. I think it still remains the same, but I'm happy to hear from staff. Also, I'm so sorry, Chair, but I also want to go back, if I may, to the previous question or the previous topic regarding Dave Whitty, and just I hear that, and I know we're in GPC, so I know we can have a bit more conversation, so I'm just taking some liberties here. I would hope that it's not, if we're looking at housing solutions, it's not just one person with one set of ideas, that there are many people in our community who have all sorts of interesting ideas from different jurisdictions, and I just want to make sure if we're going to have that comprehensive conversation, let's make sure everyone's in the room. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gesselbrecht?
Thanks, Chair. I support having the presentation on the operations center. I share some sentiments as Director, Councillor Hemmons. Like, there's been a lot of presentations on this. The information's been accessible and available for a long time. And you know, I appreciate that there's members of the community that, you know, now that it went through AAP and there's been some press around us, are realizing that this is a thing that we need to do. And so I think, given that, you know, this will be a presentation that will be, you know, using up GPC time to get information out there and allow council to ask some, you know, questions and dig into it deeper. But largely it is a communication exercise. But I do think, given what the needs are of the community, I think this is a responsive measure and a useful way. And just in terms of speaking to the GPC, I think this is a very flexible structure that council has the ability to be responsive to what the community's needs are and interests are, and also to council initiative. And so, you know, with having Dave Whitty come and present, you know, I'm fine having a one-off presenter on an item, just a little snippet of information to give to council, and a little bit of dialogue that may engender a deeper dive into housing. I didn't get the sense that there wasn't a request for a deep dive into it other than just a presentation. But should that stimulate some further interest, or there's other councillors that have ideas of presenters they want to bring, or ideas, you know, they can add it on to when Dave Whitty comes, or it can be a subsequent session where it's either a presentation or a request for a deeper dive discussion. And I think this is just an example of how the GPC can be this flexible entity that council can be responsive to emerging needs, interests, and community needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Sims would like to respond.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, just in light of the conversation around the Operations Center, the staff are certainly prepared to bring that back. And the comment that, or the things that we've been reflecting on are efforts at communication. Were they appropriate at the right time? And so this would be another opportunity to take some of the multiple presentations that have happened over the last 3 or 4 years and sort of maybe put a bow on them, and then so that the council and the public can understand the state of the project and how it's going and why it's needed. And just one of the little things that is really interesting is that over the last 12 months we've seen, without really making any changes to the project, we've seen an escalation of about $1 million a month. So that's, and I don't even want to put that out there in too much noise, but it's just an interesting thing, and I don't expect that that's going to continue. I would hope it doesn't continue, but it's also, we could have done this 20 years ago for less, and 20 years from now for a lot more. Anyways.
Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. I just listening to Mr. Sims talk about the escalation of prices. I too wish you'd done this 10 years ago as well. You know, it would have been a lot less. But anyway, just given that we have just come through the AAP, I'm just hoping that you'd do a presentation very early in January so that we can get it in front of the public as quickly as possible.
Chair, we could actually be ready for the next GPC on the 11th of December.
Oh,
That would be helpful.
that would be great.
It's
Whatever you
priority
can
for
do.
us.
Thank you, Mr. Sims, and thank you, Chair.
I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we could also add number 1 Port Drive in for, there's councillors here that haven't seen the plan. It's 5 years old. Same thing as you said, Mr. Sims, the escalating costs, I think, are going to be important for that. And I did speak to Mr. Lindsay, and although I don't think it will have a big effect, but we do have new legislation coming in from the province, and will that have an effect on the plan? So it's not something I think it has to be done right away. I'd like to see actually what the new legislation is first before it comes forward, but I am concerned about Bill 44, Bill 45, to the effect that it will have on the plan. So just bringing that forward as a possible topic for, I'm thinking like May, June, something like that. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. Any discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Perino?
No, mine was.
Thank you. And I would just like to add, actually, for the December 11th meeting, I was wondering if it may be possible to invite Dr. Shannon Waters with Island Health, our medical health officer for this area, to present some of the statistics on the toxic drug crisis in Nanaimo. She presented last week at Vancouver Island University, where Island Health held a dialogue on the crisis, and was able to present some statistics that I think would really help ground us in our discussion, especially because Dr. Julian Summers and the Community Action Team is coming to the December 11th meeting as well. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Mayor Mayor Krogh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, I just want to ask, what's the time like for that day then? Do you think we can manage all of this in one day, Ms. Curry, okay?
If the presentations are run from about 15 to 20 minutes with questions following, so 30 minutes at 3 presentations, that would be about an hour and a half. AVICC resolutions should not take very long. And then, as Mr. Sims has said, he could bring the NOC update and deep dive. So I think there should be time for a 1 to 4 meeting. I think there should be time.
No.
Thank you.
I'm hearing some disagreement with that around the table. Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, I think that the NOC is going to take at least 3 hours, because I think you're going to see at least 20 or 30 people coming to that, at least, that are going to want to speak. So I would prefer just that on its own, because the GPC is where we've said we want community engagement. That was the whole purpose, was to replace other committees, to bring the people here. And if the people that are heading up the AAP challenge, et cetera, like, they're going to want to be here and they're going to want to speak. So I think we've got a good chance it's going to be 2 to 3 hours. I don't know if other people disagree. I also am concerned, I think we're going to get into some back and forth debates between Dr. Summers and the other doctor, so that could take quite a bit of time as well. Thank you.
Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I agree with Councillor Armstrong. I think we need to, I really want to make sure that we devote time to both of those topics. So I'm tempted to say that maybe the Operations Center ought to go to the first one in January. I was going to say later in December, but it's just going to run too long. I like your suggestion, Chair, of having this doctor come from VIU, but I think the time is going to run out, and it's such a difficult topic to unfold. I think we need to give an appropriate time. That with the, with the AVICC resolutions, I think we're going to be just at least 3 hours. So.
Thank you. Ms. Gurry, so if there is a desire to move the Operations Center discussion to the first meeting in January, do we need a motion to be able to do that?
No, that was just commentary by Mr. Sims afterwards. That wasn't part of the actual motion, so we could just take that direction and go forward with it, yeah.
Okay, appreciate that clarification.
Yes, we just need a vote now on this last motion for Dr. Waters.
Okay, thank you. So a motion for us to invite,
Just the vote.
yes,
Thank
okay,
you, Chair.
thank you. May I have a vote, please? All those in favor? And any opposed? Mayor Krogh noted as opposed, and Councillor Thorpe. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, that's all I have for this item. Unless there's anything else, I think we're good to move on now.
Thank you very much. Moving on to reports, Connected Nanaimo, traffic calming update to be introduced by Bill Sims, General Manager of Engineering and Public Works.
Thanks, Chair. I'll pass this really quickly over to Barb Thomas, our Assistant Manager of Transportation, who's been working extensively in the area of traffic calming for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. We have for you another update on what we're doing with traffic calming projects. We've done 4 in the past few years, and we still continue to see traffic calming requests from residents. With the volume that we've received, we updated our transportation website. And it's quite thorough. If you've had a chance to go and have a look, there's lots of good information there for the public to find. We have about 40 locations that we've reviewed in the recent years. And of them, we've been focused primarily on Lost Lake Road and Extension Road, which we've received approval from to move from the ideas stage through to construction. Lost Lake Road was one of the neighborhood association's priority actions. Recently, we took a poll of the residents that would be affected by additional traffic calming, and 73% had concerns or were not in favor of that particular traffic calming project. So we've put a stay on that, and we don't have any additional plans to add further traffic calming measures on Lost Lake Road. Extension Road, we brought a report earlier this year forward for approval for construction, and as we've talked about just a moment ago, costs have escalated significantly. So we are proposing to phase the construction of the traffic calming on Extension Road, and we'd like committee support for that approach. And what am I supposed to say?
When she's done.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it for the traffic calming update, unless the committee has questions for us.
There is a question. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I just have a concern about phasing this. Like, I'm wondering if we should look at stopping something else, because I'm always concerned when we start phasing, we don't get back to the phases. Is it not better to maybe, I mean, these people have been waiting on Extension Road, even though I voted against a lot of this, but it passed. So I think it should all be done at the same time, and maybe move another project away. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Councillor Manley?
Yeah, I'm just curious about traffic calming. The traffic calming, does that include crosswalks and crosswalk lights, signaling, that kind of thing?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley. Do you specifically mean Extension Road?
No,
In general?
Just in general about the rest of the report, because there's some items on there like Brickyard, and we just got a letter about Brickyard and a request for a crosswalk signal there, and also sidewalks on Brickyard as well.
So traffic calming is designed to manage speeds primarily and provide comfort for other users like pedestrians and cyclists. Crosswalks, that is a different kettle of fish in that you have to manage speeds before you throw a crosswalk in, because otherwise you're enhancing the risk to the pedestrians. So if you haven't got good speed management on a road, putting in a crosswalk, what that does is it encourages pedestrians to step out with a little less care because they believe they have right-of-way, and that puts them at greater risk where you don't have speed under control. So we prefer to manage speeds before we put in marked crosswalks.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, Thank you. So to enhance crosswalks, we do use the flashing beacons, and we have other features like advanced warning signing, and in the case of a very high pedestrian crossing location, we have the option of a 3-color, what we call a half signal. So these are other ways that we assist pedestrians with their safety.
Right, and bump outs or whatever for the sidewalks, things like that.
Yes, that would be part of shortening a crossing distance, which also reduces a risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo what Councillor Armstrong said about the phasing for Extension Road. It'd be nice to just, see a lot of that done fairly quickly, just because of the concerns around that particular area, and it is in a school zone as well. Thanks.
Thank you. In order, I have Councillor Hemmons, Councillor Gesselbrack, Councillor Perino, and Mayor Krogh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree about the Extension Road phasing as well. I note in the report there's reference to the approach of not phasing it could interfere with the 2024 budget process, and that any additional funds would need to be pulled from the strategic infrastructure. So my first question is, what's being compromised in 2024 budget if we push it? And excuse me, what's the remaining strategic infrastructure reserve dollar figure? It's hard to make a judgment whether I'm willing to dip into it without an actual dollar figure. And then an additional, I just want to say thank you. I think very early in my first term, we had a really comprehensive conversation about the lack of, or the kind of, the lack of transparency in how we choose our traffic calming projects. And I think this new website with this, the spreadsheet is phenomenal. And I think that will be really appreciated by the community. A question about it. I'm all over the map here, but let me just finish this thought. So I know just in my neighborhood, the local parent advisory group organized getting traffic measurements done in front of the school. Is that something that would go on this spreadsheet? Or is that pre-spreadsheet? Because I would hate for to say to the community, you can now see where you are in the queue or whether we're considering it, but then these little projects aren't actually there, and that's the ones that people are putting a lot of energy into. So,
Chair, I can take a swing at some of those questions in maybe not the same order, but I think certainly the transportation group has heard that comment about the complexity of trying to get the information out, and the reality is that the information and the number of requests and the variety of requests are really quite all over the map. So it is a complex undertaking, and the work that's going on in the background to try and provide better information back to the public is quite tremendous. And so, the traffic calming website is one element. Staff have presented to council about the pedestrian prioritization tool, the whole thing around Vision Zero with city plans. So that's another effort to make the public aware of what we're doing. And so some of this blends a little bit, but then there's other stuff like traffic counts and traffic speeds, and the more information we can start to build with call it, some of the instrumentation and technology that we have around the city, the more information that we can build and then push that back out to the public, then groups like the PAC will be able to say, you'll be able to say to them, just go on the website and see what you've got for speeds in the neighborhood. And oftentimes people, it saves, the time and the effort of having our staff, allocate time going out and counting cars, or I'm being a little bit overly simplistic, but that's all with an effort to communicating back so that the people, before they phone in and say people are speeding, they can actually go and look on the website perhaps and say, this is what the average speeds are, this is what the count is, Beach Drive, 150 vehicles per day, what's our traffic calming threshold, 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,500 vehicles a day. So, I guess I'm not really near the traffic calming request threshold as an example. And so to Councillor Manley's question about pedestrian flashers, yes, as Barb mentioned, we may use those as traffic calming elements, but they're also sort of in this whole pedestrian prioritization piece as well, if that makes sense. So while Extension may use that as a tool, it may also be that other factors elsewhere in the city raise the priority for a pedestrian flasher rather than a simple request. So that was a bit long-winded, and I guess I'm sorry, I'll have to get back to council on what the balance of the strategic infrastructure reserve will be. But I think at this point, like, we're in the middle of all of the discussions. Oh, there's Ms. Mercer, who's probably has it at her fingertips. But I think right at this point, we're in the middle of all of the budget discussions. So, and the next year's budget has been carefully funded to sort of to grab that at this point might be a little bit challenging. But anyways, I'll let Ms. Mercer speak to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you want me to jump in? Yes. Okay. Currently, the estimated ending balance for 2024 in the SIR is just a little over 1.7 million. And we do have some decision items that'll come up on Friday that have the SIR as a possible funding source. So we didn't want to draw it down too much in order to still have funds left in that reserve to fund initiatives that come up throughout the year. So that was our comment with not really wanting to use the SIR as a funding source for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. I'm going to Councillor Gesselbrecht. You're on mute.
Two items. The first being, I didn't quite understand, so we can go into the SIR to fund this. However, I didn't catch if that will disrupt the project implementation of the first phase for 2024. There was something mentioned in the report, and maybe that was mentioned, but I didn't catch it. Yeah, through the question to staff. So if we said, okay, let's use some money from the strategic infrastructure reserve, will that delay this project, the first phases of this project?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrecht, I think the first phase of the project we can get started with. And if there's an ability to commit some funds over the next week or two to the next phases in 24, that's, we'll get to those later, if that makes sense. Does that help, Councillor Gesselbrecht?
Great. So by us saying like, hey, let's use some money from the strategic infrastructure reserve to just get this thing done, that's not going to slow things down. It'll just allow us to, when this next opportunity comes up, to finish it off.
Through the chair, that's correct. At the same time, we can get started with the first,
regardless,
the high impact portions of the work. The council has time to consider, amongst all of the other decisions points that Ms. Mercer was talking about on Friday, whether this is a good use of that fund. So you can consider it as an entire package instead of today. We're not.
Great.
Does that make
we
sense?
can wait till Friday and look at it within the larger context of other projects.
Correct.
Great. The second question I had was just in terms of the pedestrian, like when somebody writes in a request, we'd like to see an upgrade at this crossing or this intersection. Does that go into a similar spreadsheet type system? I'm just looking on the website and it says something about piloting a prioritization tool, but is there like a list of these projects or requests that are made and a system for people to inquire about and receive feedback on?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrecht. So yes, we use the pedestrian prioritization tool to evaluate and prioritize improvements to existing crosswalks. So if we're talking about an existing crosswalk, we have every crosswalk that's already marked in the city is within our prioritization tool, and it has a point score value added, an assessment of risk. So there's a point score which tells us an objective evaluation of risk. We don't have that same kind of tool for unmarked crosswalks at this point in time. So each of those are evaluated on their own merit with an engineering evaluation.
Okay, great. So if somebody from the public was like, okay, we need a crosswalk here, why isn't there a crosswalk? And they write in to the city, that would that trigger the whole traffic calming process and would be added as traffic calming for that length of road?
So crosswalks are their own entity, and we have an evaluation system around that, which would be invoked, I guess you could say, if someone wrote in and asked for a painted and assigned and marked crosswalk.
Okay, so just to be clear then, so there's the traffic calming, there's also the current crosswalk prioritization tool for upgrades, and then there's a third system for where a crosswalk doesn't exist to make a request to the city for that crosswalk.
Yes, but I want to say that's a little bit of an oversimplification because we use traffic engineering for all of the things that would come across our desks. So a crosswalk might be part of a whole entire school frontage improvement. So that's going to be evaluated as a school frontage improvement versus just a crosswalk unto itself.
Okay.
And I kind of feel like I'm muddying the waters here, but I hope I'm answering your question.
No, I think that's it's becoming a little bit clear. I guess, you know, recently there was a request from a person about a crossing at a specific area. I'm not entirely clear if there was a pre-existing crosswalk there or not, but exactly how that would be dealt with and what they would how they would write in about it, and then what would they expect as a response. That's just what I'm trying to get clarity on, but I think this helps. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful if I just talked about what happens when people send things into the Transportation Department? Because maybe that is useful for the committee.
Yeah, a
Sure.
brief, like 2-minute overview
Okay.
would be great.
Sure. So we receive requests from the public by email, at the counter, by phone, all sorts of sources. And what happens is it comes in and we evaluate it and we triage it. So sometimes the answer is simply no, and we write back a response providing the facts around the situation and a no thank you to the public. Other things that require more evaluation, we start then collecting data. So that means like site visits, measuring stopping site distance, and looking at speeds and volumes of vehicles, the neighborhood characteristics, and also what the neighborhood has asked for in the past. Also, what are our city priorities? So we look to see what all of these factors are, and we put together a response, and sometimes it's a yes, thank you, and sometimes it's a no, thank you. Where funding is required, then we bring it forward to council and ask for funding. And so all of these steps take some time, and that's how, in the end, we come up with a package of what we ought to do for this particular request, and then the response goes back to the public. And that's my 2-minute overview if you have more questions about it.
Thank you so much. I understand that a lot goes into responding to a request like that, so thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. So just coming to that, Ms. Thomas, so the Brecken area, we've had some conversation about with someone who presented here as well as some emails. And I'm just wondering, does that go into your traffic emails of how do you, is that one that you're dealing with? That's my first question.
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Perino, did you say Brecken?
Yes.
Yes, Brecken's been on our radar, I think, for a few years now because of the redevelopment.
Yes.
So we did collect speeds and volumes. We've had a number of site visits, and Mr. Rose has met with the residents in that neighborhood to talk about it with them face to face. And so, yes, it went through that kind of process. It was a little bit different because it came in as a referral through our development, our current planning department. But we've been involved with that neighborhood since the get-go. I feel like Mr. Sims wants to say something.
Just like, saw my itchy.
Saw the thumb going there.
Sorry, I didn't. And the other thing, since the presentation a week ago and the submission by the Neighborhood Association of a petition, we're actually in the process of formally responding to the petition. But as Ms. Thomas mentioned, there's been numerous responses to those residents, but and it's really sort of anticipating that traffic will increase as a result of the townhouse development, which has yet to be seen. And I think one of the things that we wanted to clarify with the residents is there's this assumption, the presenter kept talking about right in, right out, right in, right out, but that's not actually the case. There's no change to any of the movements in any of the intersections there, so we're still, perhaps struggling to see what the issues are. This is a narrow ditched neighborhood, which is really actually quite desirable.
Yes.
And to ruin it with sidewalks and traffic calming efforts would be almost, counterproductive to a livable community in a lot of ways. But we'll evaluate that as time goes on.
And I appreciate that you're dealing with it. And my other question was, you gave us the attachment A, which was terrific because it was just nice to see what you're working on and so forth. So, for example, Councillor Manning brought up the Brickyard area. And it's on your list as not supported by data. So what does that mean? Does that mean it's on a hold for it may change in the future, or how does that work?
So what that means is we've received a request for traffic calming.
Right.
And we collected speed and volume data and did a site visit. And it didn't meet our threshold for traffic calming based on the guidelines, which we have published on our website. So the speeds and volumes were likely less than our thresholds.
Yes.
And so at this point in time, it's a no thank you to the traffic
So it's just
calming.
that you saw it not supported by the data, and it will be staying there for a while. Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair, and with your indulgence, I'm going to ask Mr. Sims or Ms. Thomas, whoever wishes to do it, just to talk a little bit about how the city, the school district, ICBC, and the RCMP meet on a fairly regular basis to deal with prioritization of public safety issues when it comes to traffic, pedestrians, et cetera, because we get a lot of inquiries, and I think sometimes there's a rather silly assumption out there that nobody talks to one another with respect to these issues, when in fact that's not the case. So if you, as I say, with your indulgence, Chair, if we could allow them to give us a brief explanation of what actually happens in a practical way, that would be nice, I think, for the general public. I think we should always use the GPC as an opportunity to give a little education once in a while.
Thanks, Chair. To His Worship's comments, I can maybe provide a real brief overview and then ask Ms. Thomas to flesh it out a little bit. But I would say that, in the concept of public safety on roads, there's an engineering solution. That's what we can do. There's an operational solution, and then there's an enforcement solution. Those sorts of things can all contribute to public safety. But in all instances, you're still dealing with the wild card of how the public drives or behaves or walks or cycles or uses the road. And we can engineer the heck out of things, but if people are going to do 170 kilometers an hour on Lost Lake Road, they're going to do 170 kilometers an hour on Lost Lake Road, no matter how much we challenge them with that. And we have numerous instances locally where we've tried to foil some of those reckless driving behaviors, and numerous instances where it has zero effect. So that's just contextualizing it, and so we work with RCMP, and maybe I'll pass that over to Barb. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. To elaborate on that, we have the Nanaimo Traffic Safety Committee, and there are several agencies on that committee: ICBC, the RCMP, the school district, I'm probably forgetting some, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and their maintenance contractor, Main Road, also represents at the table. So we have the opportunity to bring safety concerns to this entire group of agencies, and we discuss the shared concerns, but also our own concerns, and get their advice and input on how we can best address them. So we do work as a multi-agency committee to help one another and support one another where we can to improve road safety for our users.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Okay, there is a recommendation, but I did hear some desire for us to not take a phased approach here. Would anyone care to either support this motion or put a different one on the floor?
Can I ask a question?
Councillor Hemmons has a question.
Thank you. Could I just, I'm sorry, I might have missed this. If we approve this today, phased, did I hear from Ms. Mercer that a slide will come forward during budget considerations to pull from the SIR to advance the full implementation? Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, that is correct. We can add a decision slide for Friday that considers the SIR as a funding source.
Great, thank you, in which case I'll move the motion.
Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you. I'm unclear on exactly what we're voting on now. Is it option 1 in the report? Are we voting to not phase this project? I'm hearing we need more information on Friday about how it will impact other decision points. So I'd like clarification, please.
So Chair, the recommended motion is to approach it in a phased manner, and that'll get the project started, and to finish round out the entirety of the budget of the project is Ms. Mercer will include a decision slide on Friday for the second part of that work. So supporting the phased approach, but with the open end for future funding options.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons?
No, thank you.
Oh. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you, Council.
Chair, before you move on to the next item, we need, there will be polling done with that item. So if we could take 3 to 5 minutes to make sure you're all set up to be able to respond to the polls for the next item, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take a quick break and everyone can sign on to Zoom.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
Welcome to the city's South Fork Water Treatment Plant. This is where we take water that we collect in our lakes and rivers, pipe it, we filter it and treat it before we send it off to the city's distribution system in your taps. This facility actually does a better job than most home filtration systems. The water that comes into your home that you use every day, that you bathe in every day, that you wash your clothes in every day, is cleaner than anything you can get anywhere.
Here you see filtration in action. It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's nothing to really see. But if you look in the tank, you'll see the froth on the top. That's dissolved organic matter, and when we aerate the tank, that froths up, and that's why that's up there.
We take all the little particles, all the organic matter, any insects or bugs that might be in the water, and pathogens that we're trying to filter out, they're all gone. We filter the water using a series of membranes.
So what we're looking at here is a membrane filtration module. So when I talk about the membranes filtering the water, this is what we're filtering the water with. And while you might think that the water flows through like the baleen of a whale, it's not true. These are hollow fiber membranes. So each of these little tiny strands are hollow, just like a shoelace. And the membrane is wrapped around the outside of these tiny little hollow fibers. So these sit in a bath of water, raw water, and then we pull the water through the wall of the straw or the shoelace, and then it travels along and it collects in this vessel at the end here. And this hole at the end is where we pull the water out.
And the membranes are like an almost impermeable waterproof layer that we pull the water through. So now we're just left with clean, pure drinking water. Take care.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use
I'm zooming.
Thank you, Council. We're getting back into it now with a report on Prosperous Nanaimo, a review of city incentives and tax exemptions, to be introduced by Bill Corson, Director of Corporate and Business Development.
Great, thanks, Chair. So I think in a true spirit of a GPC today, we wanted to basically provide you some background information on how the city tax exemption program works. And Ms. Manhas has done a great job of laying out the two programs we have. And then what we're looking today to do is to get some feedback from you on the programs, to see if you like the way they're currently operating or if there's some changes you'd like to see introduced. So it's a bit of an interactive session and a bit of a learning session for you. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Manhas. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. In 2018, we introduced the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption Program and committed to a review in 5 years' time. The purpose of today's session is to provide you with an overview of current development incentive programs. We're also going to discuss the rationale for providing these incentives, the types of incentives that are offered in British Columbia, and the enabling legislation. And in the attachment A that you received, we also covered incentives that are provided across major Canadian cities. Today, most of our time is going to be spent on really reviewing the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption Program, as well as the Hotel and Motel Tax Exemption Program. And we're going to seek committee feedback on these two programs, and we'll also go over next steps. Sorry, my clicker, okay, there, it's working now. Perfect. So there is a strategic link between the city plan and these development incentive programs. The city plan reimagined supports the continued development and revitalization of the downtown core, as a primary urban center. So this is where we're saying that we want to see critical mass of housing, employment and civic activities, as well as the highest density and mix of uses. This is the area that they're allowed. In terms of current market conditions, there's significant momentum compared to when we introduced these incentives. In the past 5 years, we've seen, of course, significant population growth. We are also seeing lots of public and private sector investment in the downtown core. In the private sector, for instance, we have the Hello Foot passenger ferry that just started. We have 2 hotels that completed. That's the Marriott Courtyard and the Quality Inn on Selby Street. And on the public side, we have the commercial street revitalizations. We had the expression of interest out for the Gene Burns building and the 2 lots on Franklin Street. We also have the Terminal Street upgrades and the downtown transit hub projects coming as well. All of these incentives are going to reinvigorate the downtown core. So why do we provide incentives? Developers face many challenges to successfully complete their projects and to generate a return on investment. And these include acquiring land, meeting regulations, financing the project, market volatility, construction phase, changing demand and demographics, environmental considerations, and so on. And in underperforming areas, these challenges are only magnified. And this is why many cities take a proactive approach to encourage investments in these types of areas. So whereas a project may naturally happen 10 to 15 years down the road, through the right incentives, the project can happen a lot sooner. And the benefits of the project, of course, go beyond the project through the multiplier effect. It contributes to a more vibrant environment, increased foot traffic in those areas, new business opportunities, and more employment opportunities as well. And essentially, we know investment begets new investments. So that really helps with the multiplier effect as well. And so most municipalities use these incentives to attract investment, to promote increased activities in those specific areas, and to enhance the overall livability and attractiveness of specific areas. Most municipalities in BC offer incentives in 4 different areas. There are the areas of affordability, sustainability, heritage, conservation, and revitalizations. And these incentives can take the form of tax reductions, tax exemptions, grants, and rebates. Property tax exemptions for revitalizations are for a specific time period, and they're for specific areas, and they generally apply to residential, commercial, and industrial properties that undergo significant improvements. And some of the municipalities also use these for institutional projects. Some of them have even used them for daycare centers. Heritage revitalization agreements, they're quite common in British Columbia, and they come in the form of property tax relief or grants in exchange for restoration and preserving the heritage properties. And these are used in virtually every community in British Columbia. Community amenity contributions are negotiated between developers and local government as part of the development process. And these are essentially enhanced development rights that are given to the developer in exchange for something that benefits the community. So it might be something like affordable housing that the community is looking for, or a park, or something like that. And in the city of Nanaimo, community amenity contributions are a requirement as a part of the rezoning process. So developers don't really have a choice in that matter, but they are seen, depending on whose perspective you look at, developers don't see it as an incentive, whereas municipalities see that there's a bit of give and take in this. So brownfield tax exemptions, these are tax exemptions for underutilized or contaminated properties. And the intent here is to encourage the cleanup and redevelopment of these sites by offsetting some of the associated costs. Rental housing property tax exemptions, these are property tax exemptions or reductions for purpose-built rental housing. So these incentives can stimulate construction for rental units and address housing affordability challenges. Some of the communities had, for instance, Kelowna had a vacancy rate of less than 1% when they first introduced these, so they've been able to create more rental units. The city of Nanaimo, of course, has that as well, although we don't call it purpose-built rental, but it is the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption Program can be used for that purpose. So under Section 226 of the Community Charter, that's where we get the authority for municipal governments to use it for environmental, economic, or social development purposes. City of Nanaimo offers many grants, tax exemptions, and rebate programs. We have sort of 8 broad categories. Operating grants is one of them, social planning grants, culture and event grants, heritage grants, recreation and sport grants, sustainability grants, other miscellaneous grants, and tax exemption programs. That's the one we're mostly talking about today, because most of the other ones are in the form of grants and rebates. So in comparison to other communities, we're on par with other communities in terms of the variety of incentives that we provide. And although we're just reviewing the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption and the Hotel and Motel Revitalization Tax Exemption programs today, we did provide information on the results of the other development programs, such as the heritage programs, in the full report. As part of this review, we also looked at potential new incentives in light of the new city plan that just got completed. So at a very broad level, there's 5 key areas where we could look at providing new incentives. And these areas include incentivizing affordable housing. This we would do in partnership with other organizations, supporting green infrastructure to build sustainable and resilient community, encouraging infill to increase density and to reduce urban sprawl, support small businesses to create vibrant and diverse communities, prioritizing active transportation. Of course, that leads to, health and wellness as well as environmental benefits. In the full report, we go into the types of incentives that could be offered under each of these 5 areas that I just mentioned. And we just mentioned these here because they're just for this committee's consideration. If there's some interest in these, we can certainly come back with more information on that in the future. In terms of the instruments for incentives or tools that we can use, tax reduction and exemptions is one way of doing it. An example, of course, of that in the city of Nanaimo is the Marriott Courtyard Hotel. Density bonuses in exchange for community amenity contributions is another tool. And in the city of Nanaimo, an example of that would be the Drip Coffee House in Departure Bay. They offered a lot of green features, public art, rain gardens, and things like that for increased density that they received. Expedited permits, we don't really provide these in the city of Nanaimo, although we've been working on improving our processes with input from the development community. Waiving or reduction of development cost charges. So we do that for some of the projects, and examples would be 702 Nickel Street, 285 Prudhoe Street, so affordable housing type of projects. Partnerships with nonprofits to provide funding, land, or public education is another tool, and we do that. We've done that with BC Housing as well, with the 60-year lease agreements that we have with them. Grants, rebates, low interest loans. So we do provide lots of grants and rebates, as you saw from what we just discussed and in the full report. The only thing we don't do is low interest loans, but that's something we would be able to do through an arm's length for-profit organization if we wanted to. Reduced utility fees and licensing fees. So in this area, we do provide reduced utility fees to seniors that meet a certain income threshold. So if they have a very low income threshold, we provide them with reduced utility fees. Sharing expertise, of course, you know that. We're always doing that with our community partners as well as our residents. Investments in infrastructure to enable more private projects. We're constantly doing that. Metro Drive is a really good example because of all the investments that the city put into that. I know it's a controversial one. I can see Councillor Armstrong. No. But because of those investments, we're seeing a lot of investments from the private sector coming on board now. So it's, sometimes it takes a municipality to take the lead on these things. Land assembly is another way that we can provide incentives, and we do that with some of the examples are Gene Burns Building and One Port Drive, for instance. So you can see that the City of Nanaimo is using most of the tools that other municipalities as well as other Canadian cities use. And each of the departments in the city are responsible for incentives that pertain to their area of expertise. And with that, we're going to move on to the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption Program now. The purpose of this program is to encourage development of new multifamily, new commercial, and renovations to commercial buildings. Eligibility for this program is the building permit value for residential and commercial, as well as renos, has to be at least $500,000, and for residential, you have to be building 4 or more units. And how it works is the owner enters into an agreement with the city which specifies the specific conditions for the exemption. And acceptance into the program happens prior to issuing the building permit. In terms of results achieved, this program started in May 2018, and at that time, the development cost charges exemption was repealed for this area, and we needed to offer something in its place, and this is a program that we introduced, and we basically kept the same boundaries. This program's been active for 5 years now, and of course we had COVID-19 in the middle of that, which curtailed construction activity for about 2.5 years due to provincial health restrictions. And under this program, we have 6 projects that are near completion or completed. And once these projects are completed, that's going to lead to 709 new multifamily units, as well as 3 commercial units. In terms of the size of the projects, most of them have been larger projects. The largest is the 195 unit on 235 Wallace Street, and the smallest project has been an 8-unit development, which is on 531 Kennedy Street. Property tax exemption under this program so far for 2023 was just under $5,000. I mean, there's going to be more coming, but it's because as soon as there's occupancy, that's when it leads to the tax exemption for the property. And some of those projects have not reached that yet. Therefore, the one that has reached it for 2023, it's only $5,000 that they're getting the exemption for. Many developers that specialize in fourplexes have approached the city and said that they're really interested in this program. Most of the projects under this program have been residential, and that's because we also have the other program, which is the hotel and motel tax exemption program. The 2 commercial projects that we had went under that program. If we didn't have that program, they would have been able to take advantage of the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption Program.
Thank you. I do have a question from Councillor Hammonds.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we've done extensions on this for developments that have either stalled or paused. Do we have a cap on how many extensions?
That is one of the things we will be discussing here in a couple of moments, if that's all right.
Great.
Thank you kindly. So this is the Downtown Revitalization Tax Exemption area. It stretches out to Pine Street to 5th Street, and it includes the old Howard Johnson site as well. Here's the feedback that we heard from stakeholders and developers. Basically, it's divided into residential and commercial projects, and we sort of looked at the pros and cons of both of those. For residential projects, the pros are the incentives made the project possible. It's beneficial for owners that are holding and renting those specific units. The cons we heard where there's really no benefit to the owners if they're selling the units, because the benefits really accrue at the operational stage versus the construction stage. So the new owners do get a benefit, so one could argue that it's a lot easier to sell a unit as well that is going to have a tax exemption for the coming 10 years as well. For commercial projects, the pros are that if you own and operate a business, you get that benefit. The cons are there's currently low demand for commercial projects in the downtown core because of public safety concerns. As well, if the owners are leasing their premises, they are getting the triple net from their tenants, so they don't feel like it's really a benefit to them. The incentive is beneficial at the operational stage, as we said, compared to the construction stage. So here are some things for council consideration. We're going to launch into a short questionnaire on this program, but before we do that, we're going to go into these areas, and that will address your question as well, Councillor Hemmons. So in our review, we found there's about 7 areas that warrant amendments. I'll take you through each of those. The tax exemption area is one of them. So I'm just gonna forward to this slide here. The pink boundaries that you see there, that is the current zone. As I had mentioned earlier, it was basically the previous development cost charges exemption area. So the question we're asking is, should the area remain the same, or should it be reduced to Milton Street, which is basically the blue that you see there, that area, or to Prideaux Street, which is about 4 blocks in from where we are currently. That's the green boundaries there. And so we're asking whether the area should remain the same or be contracted a little bit. Due to the zoning that is in place, getting any larger projects north of the Milton Street is going to be really difficult. Most of these are going to be just fourplexes. For instance, one big project that is planned in this area is the seniors project on McCleary Street, and that project can be grandfathered into this current program if we choose to reduce the boundaries. And just so you know, the core area there, in the green, that is basically the primary urban area in the new city plan, although the boundaries in the new city plan are a little bit more jagged than what we've done here, just as a reference. So the second area is eligible projects. Current requirement is minimum of 4 residential units, and we've seen lots of interest from those developers recently. Do we want to keep it at that, or do we want it to be for larger projects only? So it's really up to council whether you want to incent smaller infill or do larger projects. So the 3 options that will be provided to you in the questionnaire is keep it as it is currently, and you'll get that option for every single question. So it's 4+ units, or 8+ units, or 10+ units. Minimum investment value is another area. So should we increase the investment threshold based on current construction values? As you know, in the last couple of years, construction values have increased by at least 25%. When we first did this, it was $5 million or $500,000 threshold. Do we want to increase that to $1 million or $2 million threshold? Length of the program, do we want to put a time limit on the program? When we first introduced this program, we didn't have an expiry date on the program, although we did say we would review it in a 5 years time period. And having an expiry date on the program is really recommended because it provides clarity to developers, and it provides them with a bit of a sense of urgency to take advantage of the program. So I believe there is a questionnaire.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I just have a question. Do we have an option of, no, we don't want to see this program go, period? Because I
Yes,
know there's a
we
few
do.
of us that way. So is that going to be in,
That
when
is
you go
good.
to each of those? Because you just said that, yes, it increased to 4, 6, or 8, but is there one that says no?
So the very first question you're going to get on both of these programs is, do you want to continue with this program or not? So if you choose not to continue with the program, then yeah, you don't need to be answering these questions. And the way we've thought we would proceed with this is basically majority. So if majority of council wants to proceed with it, we'll proceed.
Yeah, but my question is for the next set. So let's say we vote no, but then it goes ahead. Is there a spot to say no to tax exemption, no to eligible projects, no to minimum investment? Like, because you just, because I want that option to say, no, I don't agree with that one, but I agree with this one. No, I don't agree with that one. Yes, I agree with that one.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think our goal was to use these questions to stimulate some conversation as well. So as we go through each of these, you're very welcome to unpack them and have a conversation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So length and percentage of tax break. Do we want this tax exemption to be for 10 years? So currently we provide 100% tax break, and we provide it for 10 years, so we're allowing maximum of everything. But we could choose any number of years for the tax break and any percentage of tax break as well. We could do 100% for 5 years and a sliding scale after that. We could separate land and improvement values. We could do a different percentage for different areas. We could base it on the type of development it is, whether it's residential, commercial, or renovation. So really, this is all to let you know that we can craft it any way we want to. However, it is best to keep it simple, because our finance department has to do some work on each of these agreements, and then the BC Assessment Authority has to do some calculations on this, and then it comes back to the finance department. They have to run through everything again just to make sure that it's all correct. So for that reason, we've kept it simple and provided you with 3 different options in this area. One, again, is always keep it as it is, and then 2 other options you'll get is 100% for 5 years, so 100% tax break on the municipal portion of taxes for 5 years, or 50% for 10 years. And the next one is the administration of the program. So currently, final approval is sought from council. And in the interest of streamlining and expediting things, council could delegate that authority to staff. So we would recommend that the approval of these agreements happen at the senior staff level, and we could provide annual or biannual update to council on the program outcomes so far. So you'll get 2 options in that one. That is, council approval or staff approval. And lastly, extension requests. So does council want to limit the number of times extensions are allowed on the agreement? And of course, as an example, we had one project come before council at least 4 times for extensions. So there we've given you some options. One is unlimited, which is what we had originally, because we want to make sure we give you what we already had, and then 1 maximum, and then 2 maximum as well. So that would be some of the council considerations. If there are no questions at this point, we can launch the poll.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Chair, through you. Thanks, Ms. Manhouse. Appreciate it. I understand that we can, if we choose to proceed with this program, we can tailor it to suit what we feel is our needs. But I'm curious on some of these elements. For example, minimum investment, length of program, percentage of tax break. Do you have any information, because I'm always interested in best practice, other municipalities that might be using a similar program? Do we have any guidelines that might influence how we vote when it comes to these options?
Absolutely. So those are in the full report, but I can quickly go over them.
I obviously missed it in the full report.
No, let's go with the tax exemption area. Again, On that, what do other municipalities do? They use it for whatever area they think needs most help. So some of them have it just in the downtown core, some of them have it in other areas where they want to see investment. Eligible projects, again, some municipalities use it for, most municipalities use it for the purposes we're using it for. So they have like a hotel motel tax, they have, they're certainly using it for commercial projects, industrial projects. It's sort of like wherever they want to see more density happening and it isn't naturally happening. So that's one of the criteria. Minimum investment, everybody is below our minimum investment level currently. The only other community that has a $500,000 currently is Kelowna, so $500,000 for them. There are some communities that have it as low as like $75,000. I think that's too low, but they haven't reviewed their programs yet. They're at different stages, so many of the communities are planning on reviewing their programs. Length of program, I would say that's generally in the 5 to 10 year range in most communities. Percentage of breaks, yeah, we get a whole gamut of things there too. Some communities do 100% for 5 years, and then they do a sliding scale after that. They might do, 60%, and then, in year 6, and then, yeah, so they do a sliding scale. And then administration of the program, there wasn't too much on that or the extension requests. Other municipalities I found did not have any really requests for extensions. That's what I found out through all the interviews that I did. So that was kind of unique to Nanaimo. Yeah.
No, that's very helpful, thank you. I suspect the extension aspect might relate also to COVID, but that's good information, thank you.
So Chair, I just wanted to add a few points there. In terms of the length of the program, the 10 years, I think from Ms. Manhas' research was generally what most people were doing, giving the maximum 10 years. The percentage piece is the interesting one, where some municipalities do scale it down, which I think in principle makes sense, except that it means someone in the finance department has to be keeping track of it to adjust it every year. And it's just one of those little details that can get lost. So just from an administration perspective, in our discussions, we felt it was try to keep it as simple as possible, because that can get forgotten. Even just setting this program up, it's interesting just interaction between us and BC Assessment for them to note that a property has come into the program. So just want to flag that with you. The other thing is, and when we're looking at the other programs, I think most of them have taken our work and copied it. So, so best practice is sometimes hard to.
Yes.
You can see there's a lot of copying. I agree with Ms. Manhas. The values I think are kind of low, especially given today's construction market, and certainly with I think the other issue I'd like to just flag too is, of course, with the province's regulations, and if everyone's going to be doing, if there's going to be a lot of incentive to do fourplexes, then that will mean that the majority of every property in the downtown core would now be subject to this. So you can imagine the potential influx you might get if this program stayed as is. So that you might want to consider the number of units that are in the program to keep it manageable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I really appreciate the input of staff on questions like this. Thanks.
Councillor Gesselbrecht, do you still have a question?
Yeah.
Please.
Just in terms of like the numbers of folks, like projects that subscribe to the program in the last 5 years, in terms of like success, did it reach expectations that we thought what we'd have people subscribe in the amount of buildings? Like just looking at some other municipalities, I don't know how long they had their programs running, but it looked like a lot more construction was seen compared to what we've witnessed here. Would that be correct in that observation?
Some of the communities had their program introduced way before we have had ours. So we've only, especially the downtown revitalization tax exemption one, we've only had it for 5 years, and half of the time was COVID. So I think, you know, keeping that in mind, so say 2.5 years or so, we're seeing like lots of projects. You know, we're seeing close to 800 new units being built, and just the financial impact of that on taxes. I think we've seen modest growth, is what I would say. I think it's pretty modest. Yeah, it's not you know, as fast as it could have gone, but it's manageable.
Yeah, through the chair, I think the take-up has been probably less than we anticipated. And certainly I think we saw it skewed towards smaller developments. We saw a lot of the, you know, like Ms. Manhas mentioned, the fourplex people being interested in it. It's really only been in the last few years where we're starting to see projects like TELUS and projects like the Caledonia Clinic, you know, coming forward, and that's where you're seeing the great number of units that Ms. Manhas pointed out. So I think it is still early days. You know, we still have a number of few number of large projects we want to see come forward at 77 Chapel Street, hopefully the Gene Burns, hopefully our lots on Franklin Street. So there should be quite a few more projects. Port Drive would be part of this as well, given the current area, if you stay with it. So there could be, I think, over the next 5 years, considerable uptake.
And just another question, in terms of, I mean, canvassing the development community on tax incentives to build, I don't think you'll have anybody opposed to it. Although it looks like some circumstances, the savings doesn't really go to the developer to address sort of the upfront barriers to the construction of it, unless it, you know, it does get carried on to the folks buying the building, making it more easily to sell. I guess with the, like, are there other barriers in place that is making it less desirable to develop in the downtown, where, you know, if we address those, we'd see more benefit than the tax program?
I think this is just another tool that can help attract investment versus if we didn't have this tool. And of course, we can be doing all these other things as well. And we are, as you saw, with, you know, investing in our infrastructure and all the different tools that we talked about. We're doing that as well. And this is just another tool that helps attract investment and reinvigorate and revitalize specific areas of the city. So one of the reasons that the tax exemption programs are a good instrument is if it sort of meets some of the conditions. For instance, like, you want to provide these incentives for something that the community has identified as a priority for them. And it's something that isn't naturally happening quick enough. And you also want to make sure that it's time limited, because you want to make sure that once things start to pick up on their own, you don't want to be providing this because you are losing a little bit of revenue over time. You also want to make sure that it's sort of specific to an area. So where the need is most, where there's more need of help in terms of injecting investment in those areas. And it's also a better instrument than offering grants or rebates, because then you have to come up with the cash up front, so to speak. So it is just another tool in in your toolkit to spur investment.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and a question through you to our staff. I'm just going to take you back just a little bit. I'm very familiar with DCC's, developmental cost charges. Is the CAC's, the community amenity contributions, are they in effect DCCs, or is that over and above? Because so with developments, we still have the developmental cost charges coming. We just, in fact, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, through the chair, what developers like before was in the downtown area, we had an exemption area where people didn't have to pay for development cost charges.
Yes.
So from a pro forma perspective, when you're doing your development, you save money up front.
Yes, exactly.
And the legal advice we got was that wasn't the best way of doing things. So we ended that when we updated our development cost charge bylaw 5 years ago, and instead we replaced it with the tax exemption program. So we took the one area and basically removed the DCC exemption area, because that wasn't, we shouldn't have been doing that, and then we replaced it with the tax exemption area. So people now pay DCCs downtown. So they receive a benefit after the building's built now on a tax perspective. So when Ms. Manhouse was talking about some of those projects, 2 of them are rental buildings, which works well for a developer whose plan is to build the building, hold and operate it. They'll receive a discount in operating the building.
Yes.
But if you're a developer who wishes to build a building and then put it on the market and sell it, you don't receive that benefit yourself.
Okay, and the only other question I have, Chair, is when you give a tax exemption on a building and then it's sold, is the benefit of the tax exemptions passed through to the buyers? And how do you protect the buyers? Because when I saw that before, I thought, wait a minute, how in the world are you going to protect the buyer?
Yes, it does extend to the new owner for the residual. If it's 5 years left on the agreement, yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's on the title of the property, so even if the property transferred 3 or 4 times, it stays with the property.
Okay,
not the owner.
But there's no way for us to watch the price of that to protect the price from going up exponentially?
No.
Okay. That was my concern, is you just raise the price up enough. Thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair, through you to staff. I'm curious about the 709 units. Do we have a breakdown of that? Like how many are rental units, how many are strata? Are any of them affordable units?
Yes, let me just take a quick look here. So the 340 Campbell Street, that is certainly, that's going to be around 160 units. That's rental units completely. The 195, I believe, are rental units. Chapel Street they haven't received this exemption yet. They haven't come to the building permit process yet. I believe only one of these, which is the Milton Street, that's also a rental unit. That's right. So Hackett Street, do you know if that one's a rental or owner? Okay, so the 10-unit multifamily, that's an owner one. So most of the larger ones, so majority of the units are all rental, which is really good because we're trying to encourage rental properties in our community to increase affordability as well as to increase the rental stock as well.
And are they all market rate rental? All market rate rental?
Yeah, through the chair they are. The Chapel one, I don't think is a rental building. I think it's condominiums.
Okay. And I'm just curious about, one of the sites that would, if we change the boundaries, that would be interesting to see developed is on Milton Street, where there's that old lumber supply place. There used to be a warehouse right beside the railway. That's a brownfield site, I imagine. It's probably got contamination on it. Do you know?
I actually don't know the specifics, but it's probably a good assumption.
Good guess. Because I one of the things I would be interested in is seeing some of the brownfield sites downtown developed. And so, we got the corner of Comox and Terminal and right down through the Terminal Trench. It's a gateway right through the city. And, you know, it'd be interesting to see some of that area in the Terminal Trench developed, and also just that little area around Milton, if there was an incentive around developing brownfield sites to ensure that they don't just remain fallow for decades and decades, like some of them have.
Yeah, through the chair, it's interesting because with the downtown program, you actually get the same benefit, whether you could call it a brownfield program, but you're getting the same benefit. You could call it a hotel program, but you're getting the same benefit. Because it has a broad definition, you're actually capturing any development in the downtown, regardless of what the purpose is, which is quite interesting. When Ms. Manhas talks to you about the hotel program later, you know, it's very specific to a use. So you kind of have this broad brush in the downtown to encourage brownfield, to encourage commercial, to encourage rental, to encourage condominium development. It's kind of a catch-all program. Yeah.
Brownfield's a bit of a double whammy, though, because you have to deal with contamination.
Yeah, through the chair, you're absolutely right. And I think the challenge is there are no other incentives to provide for brownfield. So it's kind of, that's the program you would, if you set up a brownfield program for Nanaimo, it would be the same program, just maybe not just focused in the downtown.
Yeah,
but there are no incentives in terms. I guess the city could work with a developer to get grants and stuff from FCM, etc. But there'd have to be some sort of municipal purpose to that development for that to happen.
Yeah, we've got a lot of abandoned gas stations in town, particularly along the highway. And then the 3 commercial units, I may have missed it in the report, but what are the 3 commercial units that took advantage of the program?
Sorry, thank you. Thank you very much. The 3 commercial units were on the 507 Milton Street building.
Okay.
So it's a mixed-use development, has residential as well as commercial units.
And that's the one that's had 4 extensions.
And maybe one more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrecht?
Thanks. Yeah, just a question. So it was mentioned that there was like a DCC exemption program beforehand. What about CACs? Is that something that's ever negotiated to waive in order to develop into an area?
Through the chair, maybe Mr. Lindsay wants to cover this one. He'll have a better perspective.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I heard the question. You're saying are DCCs waived? Was that
So there was a DCC program that Mr. Corson mentioned that we had in the past, but there was some legal issues with it, so we stopped doing that and went to the tax exemption system. But I'm just curious on CACs, although voluntary, they're kind of not voluntary. And do we ever, can you incentivize development through not having CACs in certain areas, the community amenity contributions?
Sorry. Thank you for repeating the question. I think absolutely through the chair, I think councils could structure a CAC program with the idea of having a recognition that there's certain areas of the community where you might want different or larger amenity contributions than others. I think, there's a couple things I keep in mind here. And one is when we removed the DCC bylaw, it was in part because of advice, but it was also in part because we recognized we needed to actually spend DCC money downtown. So we added DCC projects back 5 years ago, and you can't do DCC projects in an area without collecting in that area. So it became a reality that we had to put it back in the DCC bylaw. But I think a lot of the discussion, sorry, I'm getting off the answer to your question, but I think a lot of the discussion that also occurred is something that Councillor Manley's touched on, and there's a recognition there 5 years ago that whether it's contaminated sites or not, the reality of developing in your downtown, we heard, is more expensive than developing greenfield. Whether it's a brownfield site or the fact that you have an existing building that needs to be torn down, all those things in the absence of other incentives, encourages people to go develop on a greenfield site where we want more development in the downtown. So that was part of the rationale. But sorry, the short answer to your question is yes, you could amend CACs. Of course, the future of CACs are going to be very interesting pending the provincial legislation, and we may be at a point in the near future where either they're not no longer required or significantly changed because of that. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I guess my question just on effectiveness is if we want a certain area to be developed, is it like what can we do to lower the barrier like up front for the developer to build the building? And sometimes I'm not entirely sure if like the tax program directly captures that. And I guess it runs into, you know, maybe the utility of having a development corp is just like, if we know the sites that we'd like to see buildings on, how can we mobilize like very specific interventions into areas and not have other things that may not be a priority but are receiving the support, and you know, narrowing the area of what's affected is, you know, one thing, but I mean, being even more targeted, and just trying to like acknowledging there's some of these areas that for us to bring it to zero, where it's the same to put a multifamily building there as opposed to in a greenfield site in the north end, is that maybe that's worthwhile money for the city to spend to deal with those initial brownfield considerations or whatever the barrier is. Thanks.
Through the chair, I don't know if there's a question in there, but I would say, you know, the Development Corporation could, of course, be another tool that council may want to examine. However, that would probably only apply unless you were going to be really aggressive about the lands you acquired. It would only apply to the lands under the control of the Development Corporation, where these incentives are intended to encourage both private investment across the board. At the time when we brought the tax exemption in, the discussion we had is this is the tool that is actually intended to encourage development. It's not to have DCC exemption areas. That's not the right tool, as Mr. Corson said. And the whole discussion was that if council wants to incent development in any certain area, this is the actual tool that the province puts in place to do that. By all means, and Ms. Manhus has done a really good job today of talking about all the other tools that council has at its disposal. I mean, including, and I don't think you should undersell the impact of your parking requirements, for example. We have lower parking requirements in the downtown. That translates to a significant cost for developers versus, you know, building on greenfield sites. But all of those things add up and have an impact.
Great, thanks.
It's poll time.
So, okay, so
Council,
no more questions?
Is there
We will
any
launch
desire-
our poll.
Oh, sorry.
We can poll then if there are no further questions.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any desire among council to have a bit of a conversation about this before we get into the polls. Nope. Okay.
And good news, they just extended the truce in Gaza 2 more days. So that's good news, no hostages got released. And Alberta just passed the Sober Act.
I saw that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm the only no.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you,
Okay,
Natalie.
Chair, looks like we're finished.
All right, so the results are in, and we see that we are going to proceed with this because we have a majority yes. Sorry, I am having some difficulty reading the screen from this far. So number 1 is definitely a yes. Question number 2 looks. Would you like to have a discussion for each one? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We will have a discussion on that. So it looks like question number 2, the winner is C. No? Okay, sorry. So let's have discussion on that. Perhaps we can hear from everybody that voted to see what their rationale was, and we can have a re-vote. I believe we'll have to do the vote not electronically, but by putting up our hands.
Okay, so on the second question, should the tax exemption area be reduced? Does anyone want to weigh in on why they voted a particular way? Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I don't think of Nanaimo the way it is today. I think of Nanaimo 25 or 30 years down the road, and realistically, surely you want to encourage development in what most of us think is the downtown, and for me, that extends out to Pine Street. So I would not see reducing it. I was one of the two, obviously. If we were swamped with applications and, considering the potential of the lost revenue was substantive, it would be one thing, but we're not in that situation. And if we were, then I'd take a different position. But for now, I think what we have is what we should keep.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I voted the same as the mayor on that one for the same reasons. I've heard staff say that there's a number of smaller projects that could be appropriate for that area, and I think that's worthy of incentivizing.
Councillor Manley.
I voted to go 4 blocks in, and the reason why I did that is because the Old City Quarter and those neighborhoods, that's our heritage neighborhood in this community, and there's a lot of beautiful heritage homes there that I think if we just destroy that whole area, we've destroyed the character of the old city, and that's why I voted to move it in. There are a couple of areas that I think would work for redevelopment, in particular the site I mentioned on Milton, but if we had a brownfield exemption that might fit into that, and we could maybe look at exceptions, but I would hate to see all of the old character homes bulldozed for redevelopment.
No one's going to do that.
Yeah, no, it's redevelopment.
Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think just really honing clarity of what we're trying to achieve is really going to determine how to set this all up. And I don't feel that there's a guiding clarity yet of what we're going for in terms of what type of densities and what actually is necessary to be incentivized or not. I don't think I've got enough information in terms of the economics and from the development community of what actually would move the dial. And then the question is moving the dial on what? And I guess in my mind, I'm looking at how can we get large multifamily developments within that downtown area, not so much infill or in these those blocks higher up. I think, you know, if the province is going to change the rules on things, I think we'll see more fourplexes than that. I don't see a huge appetite in those communities to have like a big 10 large apartment buildings stacked in there. You know, where there's a void is like right in that downtown core area, which is the 4 blocks in. And I think if we have a tax exemption program, which I'm not supportive of, I think that we should definitely target it in the area that we're not seeing a lot of movement and there's not a lot of incentive or there's more barriers to actually developing it. And so I would support the, you know, moving it all the way into Prideaux Street at a minimum. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Manley. I think you'll see people, and they've seen it in Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, where they are going in and they're tearing down the old homes because they can make a lot more money by getting rid of the old homes and building the 6plexes. And also it is increasing the rents considerably. So I think we have to be really concerned about that because that's been proven in the other cities that the rents go up considerably. As soon as they take down the old buildings, the rents get jacked. Thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Well, Chair, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I messed up. In my head, I was doing the opposite way. So actually, if I was doing a revote, I would say to Pine Street for exactly the same reasons as Mayor Krogh said. The further out, the better. I certainly agree with Councillor Armstrong's comments. I've seen it too, where they get torn down. However, I think that there's certainly other ways to protect that if we wanted to. I don't think fourplexes are a bad thing. I don't think they're necessarily bad, and I'm not entirely sure that. I think our situation is certainly dire enough that we want to increase development as far out as possible. So, other than my mess up, I would, if I revoted, I would go to Pine Street.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock.
I think the question though we need to ask as council is like, say, you know, I don't think 4 to 6plexes in those like Pine Street, Milton Street hubs are a bad thing. I think they're great. The question is, do we really need to incentivize that, or will the market sort of take care of that and it's not a huge concern where the barrier is existing? And so if we have the program here, because it's low barrier and easy to do, we're really just throwing money at a situation that doesn't need money thrown at it. And I think that's the question that I don't believe, you know, I don't believe it's a thing that we really need to intervene into too much, where we need to intervene more in sort of the larger density projects that are deeper in. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chair, just to provide some context, and actually to follow up on Councillor Gesselbrock, that was kind of the staff recommendation too, was that we saw that in those single family neighborhoods around Pine Street, that there is demand for fourplexes, those are happening, but how do we encourage people to make those larger investments in the downtown core? And our thought was if we did shrink the area, it's more focused and it's an area has the zoning, et cetera, that accommodates a higher level of development. So that's why, I know we didn't put recommendations in here, but just so you know, that was our thinking at the time. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to have another vote on this particular question of whether the area should be reduced. So for the first choice, should it be reduced to or kept at the current, which is Pine Street? All those in favor of keeping it at the current Pine Street? Councillor Perino, Thorpe, Eastmere, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh. That motion carries. Moving on to number 3.
Great, thank you very much. Looks like number 3, we also have a tie in terms of the majority for B and C. So if we could please have that discussion again and a revote, that would be really appreciated.
Thank you. So as far as whether it should be incentivized at 4, 8, or 10 units, does anyone want to weigh in? Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you. I voted for 10 for what we've already heard from staff because people are doing the 4 and 6 anyhow. So let's get to the 10. If we're going to have to densify, then let's do it to the 10. Thank you.
Mayor Krog?
I'm with Councillor Armstrong on this, and particularly, I mean, given the province is likely to allow fourplexes anyway on a single-family lot, it would be kind of silly to vote in favor of that being the minimum. That's going to happen as a matter of right. So if you're going to do it, go big or go home, so 10.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. So to me, this question related to the previous one, and since I was in favor of keeping the boundary larger to accommodate incentivizing smaller 4+ perhaps proposals, I voted for the current model. I can be persuaded otherwise, but that was my reasoning.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
I voted for 10+ based on a smaller footprint, because I like to see more density in the downtown zone, but not to really destroy what is the old city. So if we go 10+ now with we're going to lose heritage homes. We're going to lose the heritage of what heritage we have in terms of our colonial heritage, as the mayor would say.
Thank you. I voted for 8, just because sort of striking that middle, but thinking about some of the lot sizes and how dense a development would have to be in order to fit 10 onto a piece of property, I think 8, that's sort of why I chose 8, because I think we've seen some development proposals come forward where it's too dense on the piece of property, and you're losing things like developers aren't including long-term bike storage and things that really make for a good long-term development that actually really serves the needs of the people who live there. So I think limiting it to 10+, I think we may be missing out on the opportunity to have some really good human scale developments.
So through the chair, I just want to remember, this isn't zoning. This is just access into a tax exemption program. So this doesn't grant somebody the right to build 10 units on a property. It's only if they build 10 units, then they could get into the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. The struggle that I had, I went with 8 as well, because downtown, I think 10+. But as you get further out, I'd rather see a little lower. That's where I'd rather see the 4, and maybe in some circumstances 8, and depending on the area. But I kind of follow where Councillor Manley's thinking too. Just unbelievable.
Councillor Gesselbrecht?
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely would like to see it at 10+. I think that's sort of the area that needs like the most support. Again, if it's at 4 and that wide range, I think we're just giving money, public money into private folks where there really is not a need for incentivization. And, for me, it's just a bit of a waste of money.
Okay, I'm going to call the question on 10+, whether it should be revised to 10+. All those in favor? Councillor Manley, Perino, Eastmere, Hemmons, Mayor Krog, Councillor Armstrong, and Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Chair, would you mind calling the names of those opposed?
Oh, yes.
And just to be sure, because some people you don't need to raise your hand to be in favor, but if you call those opposed and we get that number, that's accurate for our minutes, and that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, and all those opposed? Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. That motion carries.
Great. And now just looking at the answers to question number, we have another tie. We have a tie for 500,000 and 1 million, so we'll have to have discussion on this again.
4.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I voted for 2 million because you can't build any of these for under 2 million anyhow. So I think it's a redundant question, because I haven't seen, houses are costing $1 million, so to build a 4 or 6-plex is going to be over 2 million easy, so that's why I went with 2.
Thank you. Mayor Krog?
I voted for 1 million, but I'm thinking more about it because I just thought, what's 500,000 gets you? Virtually nothing nowadays. So perhaps, frankly, from an incentive perspective, probably 2 million is better, so I may well switch my vote and join Councillor Armstrong.
Councillor Gesselbrecht?
Well, I mean, if we're going to limit it to 10 plus units, we might as well just put it to 4 million, because 2 million will get you, you know, a unit and an outhouse.
Okay. So I will call the question on whether it should be revised to 2 million. All those in favor? Oh. Sorry, one moment.
Sorry, Chair.
Nope, please. Yeah.
I just wondered if we should go through each option and ask who's in favor of each option.
Okay.
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah. So we'll start with the 500,000. That's the current.
Yeah.
All those in favor of keeping it at 500,000? Any opposed?
Just a second.
Councillor Gesselbrecht?
I raise it up. I just have to attend. Somebody's at my door here that I
Okay, that does not carry with everyone opposed. We're just going to jump right to the 2 million. All those in favor of changing it to 2 million? And those opposed? Councillors Perino and Thorpe, and that motion carries.
Thank you very much. And the next question, length of the program. We do have a majority on this one, so that's fantastic. So that's A, and that's 5 years. Thank you. And number 6, length and percentage of the tax break. So on this one, we do have a majority, 5 years, 100%. And then if you're okay with it, we'll move forward from that.
No.
Perfect.
No, because we didn't on the other ones that were 25, 25, 50.
All right, we can have a discussion on it then and a vote again. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I went for 5 years because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think putting it for 10 years is far too long, and it can be recessed in 5 years if it's working. I think to give something like this, like if we're booming and we're going to give all these people free money and it's not coming back to the community and stuff. So for me, it's 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Completely agree with that reasoning. Councillor Manley?
Yeah, I voted for 10 years at 50%. I voted for 10 years at 50%, just less, so that we still get some money back in. There's still an extended period that they get the exemption, but it's not 100% of the value.
Not seeing anyone else wanting to jump in on this, so
601, half dozen the other.
we'll start at the current, which is 10 years at 100%. All those in favor? Mayor Krogh, and all those opposed? Councillors Manley, Perino, Thorpe, Eastmere, Hemmons, and Armstrong. That does not carry. Okay, 10 years at 50%. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Councillors Perino, Thorpe, Eastmere, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, and Councillor Armstrong. And 5 years at 100%. All those in favor?
I've got a question, actually, if it's possible.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, I had to step out there. Just on this, like, what's the staff recommendation for this? And I guess, like, what is the impact of doing it shorter or not? Is just reducing the incentive? Like, I guess if we're going to be putting an incentive in place, I want to make sure that it's actually worthwhile. And I don't, like, in the absence of like more detailed economic data, it's difficult to tell. Like, you know, if we did 10 years at 50% or 5 years at 100%, it may not be worth it to anybody to go ahead and then it's not useful. Do we have any data to this?
Can I answer?
So, I'm going to go to Ms. Manhas, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, we would recommend 5 years at 100% because I think it's substantial enough because it's 100% and it's more upfront than it would be 10 years at 50%. That just, this is enough to potentially make the project viable, but not have a huge strain on the city in the long run. So yeah, this is certainly would be staff's recommendation on this one.
Thank you. So I'm going to call the question again. 5 years at 100%. All those in favor? And those opposed? Mayor Krog. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next one, agreement approval authority to staff. Thank you very much for that. That one passes. And the last one, we will have to have discussion on that, even though we do have majority, so we'll open it up for discussion. Go ahead, please.
Mayor Krog.
I was quite surprised at this vote, actually. Candidly, the way development works, and this is no surprise to anybody, you have all your money sunk in the hole, so to speak, in the construction and all the costs of carrying this. If there was ever an incentive to complete a project on time, it is in fact the very factor involved in a development. If someone's applying for an extension, it's because they are having some serious troubles trying to complete it. Nobody is going to want to delay the revenue source which comes from completing the development and starting to either sell or rent the units, whatever the case may be. So I would leave it unlimited. Why not? The concept is to encourage development. It's not to make it more difficult. As I say, the only reason you would be asking for extension is because you need it. It's not as if you're going to want to say, gee, I want an extension so I can delay getting some revenue to pay my banker and my lawyer and my architect and my engineer and my paver and my carpenter and my contractor. So I think it's a no-brainer, but that was no disrespect to fellow members of council.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, I'll disagree with the no-brainer. For me, we've seen some of them shop around, and they just sit and sit because they're waiting for prices to go up or they're waiting for prices to go down. So it's not encouraging development if they can keep this for as long as they want. So I think if we want to get them built, that's why you should have a timeline for that. And if they don't want to take advantage of that, then they can come back because I'm sure we'll extend the program after. But I think it should be 1 year or one expiry, or we're going to see people sit on these empty properties like we do now. Thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. And a question through to staff. I actually voted for the 2 maximum because my concern is I want to give them enough, but I don't want to, as Councillor Armstrong said, see it going over and over and over. And we have one particular one that I think we've had 3 extensions with a possible, didn't I hear you say 4 extensions. So where does the line for you draw? What would you suggest?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that if we're going to have this program run for 5 years, which we've already chosen, so it really doesn't matter. That's the only time frame in which they could ask for an extension. After that, they cannot ask for an extension anyways. So yeah, I think, unlimited is a little bit too liberal, but I would say 1 or 2 are great. That would be my suggestion.
So
2 if we want to be generous.
Okay, so could they come back to council should the absolute necessity of it happen, or would that be seen as unfair?
No, they could come back as long as it's within, because we have the program basically expires after 5 years. Okay. So if the program has already expired, they cannot come back anyways, because we have the right to discontinue the program or reintroduce the program again. And that's why it's good to have that 5-year term, because there's some onus on them to also, because they might think, oh, well, maybe this program won't be continued, and it may not be continued. Therefore, yeah.
That's right. I just don't believe. I like your thinking, Mayor Krog, but I just don't believe someone who's extended it 4 times is actually. There's something going on there. There's more to that story. Well,
Chair, I do want to add that so we get extensions. there's two types. One is the property hasn't started construction yet. And on those ones, that's where I think it aligns with what Councillor Armstrong's saying, that someone is maybe
Yes.
trying to find financing or trying to find a purchaser. There's other ones, once the project's under construction, which is what the mayor's talking to, when someone's already in the ground, they're committed to doing that project. So what I think we can do is when we update the bylaw and we're putting in some of the constraints, I think we can flesh it out a bit more.
That would be helpful because those are two different scenarios and two different options might be worthy of, of looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hammonds?
Thank you, Chair. I voted for one. I could be convinced of two. I'm against unlimited. I'm curious in terms of Councillor Armstrong's comments, could a developer who has multiple projects throughout the city who is facing some financial burden sit on their downtown developments and go forward and develop their other properties because they have the tax breaks on this? So, and I'm not sure if that's a realistic scenario, but I could see that happening, and that's why part of the reason I would vote for reduced.
They could, but the way we set it up, there actually is a timeline. So we negotiate, in each tax exemption, we negotiate a time period for them to start construction.
I would argue there's no timeline if they can get.
I think you came back for extensions, fair enough. Yeah. But to be honest with you, there are some where they have expired and we've just not brought them back. We've just let them die. So it's up to the developer to decide if they want to push it or not. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Gesselbrecht, then Manley and Armstrong.
I think I had my questions answered. I'm supportive of one, and then we can put something in that they can come petition council if they need it extended again. But one or two, it doesn't really make a difference. But I prefer one. Thanks.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Question to staff. The timelines for extensions. So what are those timelines? Because if they haven't put a shovel in the ground and they're asking for an extension, then they're obviously shopping around, or and that's part of the process. But what are the timelines where they're end up asking for an extension?
Yeah, so each project we do negotiate with them, understanding the scale of their project and the developer and the site they're working on, etc. So, a larger project, we know that because there's different timelines in there. So the first timeline is when are you going to start, when are you going to pick up your building permit, when are you going to start construction, and then the last one is when are you going to get occupancy. And so I think the one we've seen the 5 extensions on is where a person's been in the ground, they're working on the site, but the occupancy date keeps getting pushed back. And that developer, coming from a good place, when they're giving a date, they don't want council to think that they're being unrealistic. So they say, I think I can really do this in 4 months. I say, okay, you can do it in 4 months? Yep. So then we write down 4 months. You grant the extension, and then they go, oh, I really wish I had a few more months. So then we extend it again, and then they go, oh, I really wish I had a few more months. So I think a part of this is being realistic on knowing the developer and knowing the climate for construction at that time, and making sure we're actually realistic about dates and not trying to be too tight on those dates, because it does cause, that's what's really causing the extensions on the construction side of things.
Yeah, no, I can really understand the COVID situation and the delays related to that. I just don't want people getting getting this tax exemption and then extending, think it's, they're just gonna carry on with it for as long as they feel they need to without actually putting a shovel in the ground and building something, because the idea is to get things built. So I don't know, I'd stick with 2 maximum, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I voted for unlimited because I can't believe that developers would deliberately delay their project. I think there's usually very good reasons that they would need extensions, and we look no further than the supply chain issues. But I don't want to be seen as too liberal, as Manhas indicated that option might suggest. So I'm willing to change my vote to 2 maximum, but I think we should have some flexibility here.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, just for some clarification, so Because to me, there is a difference between shovels in the ground versus they keep asking. Prime example I'm going to use is the hotel that was supposed to go in on Front Street, which I've been hearing about for 10 years now. Still hasn't happened, right? So that's one of the examples I would give you, that it's not happening, yet he's building all the other places. So that's one of my concerns. So I guess for me, the tax exemption would be like, one, after 5 years, if there's no shovels in the ground. If there's shovels in the ground, I have no problems with 3 or 4, because I think that's what I'm hearing, like, you know, like prime example would be the COVID or the supply chain issues, which we're still seeing, or financing, because we know some are, with the renegotiations of loan from 2% up to 6%, some of them, their projects are no longer viable. I take a look what's happening in Vancouver at Oak Ridge, where they're now in, I don't know what you call it here, I guess bankruptcy, whatever, but it's one of their largest projects, yet they're building in other provinces, but they let this one go into bankruptcy. So that's my concern. So I really have no issues with limiting it once shovels are in the ground. So is that something that can be done, or like coming back to council after 2 extensions with extenuating circumstances?
Yeah, like through the chair, normally we give them a year from when you grant the tax exemption to when they come and pick up the building permit. And then there's a time period, usually a year from the building permit to get into the ground. So we can clarify some of those criteria, and following today's presentation, we're going to come back to you with a revised bylaw.
Okay.
With all that stuff kind of detailed out, and we can go through that with you.
No, it's good for me.
Your points are well taken. Thank you.
Not seeing any other speakers, I'm going to call the question on the 2 maximum, none after the expiry date. All those in favor? And those opposed? Mayor Krogh, Councillor Armstrong, and Councillor Gesselbrecht, that carries. Thank you, Council. I think we will take our break after the final comments from Ms. Manhas. We have more. Oh, we do?
Yeah. We do have one more program to go through. Did you want to take your break?
I think we'll take our break now, and sure, you will reconvene in 10 minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. This sure is the coldest rink in town.
Whoa! Yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go! Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
Welcome to the city's South Fork Water Treatment Plant. This is where we take water that we collect in our lakes and rivers, pipe it, we filter it and treat it before we send it off to the city's distribution system in your taps. This facility actually does a better job than most home filtration systems. The water that comes into your home that you use every day, that you bathe in every day, that you wash your clothes in every day, is cleaner than anything you can get anywhere. Here you see filtration in action. It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's nothing to really see. But if you look in the tank, you'll see the froth on the top. That's dissolved organic matter, and when we aerate the tank, that froths up, and that's why that's up there.
We take all the little particles, all the organic matter, any insects or bugs that might be in the water, and pathogens that we're trying to filter out, they're all gone. We filter the water using a series of membranes.
So what we're looking at here is a membrane filtration module. So when I talk about the membranes filtering the water, this is what we're filtering the water with. And while you might think that the water flows through like the baleen of a whale, it's not true. These are hollow fiber membranes. So each of these little tiny strands are hollow, just like a shoelace. And the membrane is wrapped around the outside of these tiny little hollow fibers. So these sit in a bath of water, raw water, and then we pull the water through the wall of the straw or the shoelace, and then it travels along and it collects in this vessel at the end here. And this hole at the end is where we pull the water out.
And the membranes are like an almost impermeable waterproof layer that we pull the water through. So now we're just left with clean, pure drinking water. Take care.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other two arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
This is a plug catch basin. We have 10,000 plus of these in the city of Nanaimo with over 600 kilometers of road. Maintenance staff can't be everywhere at once. So we don't ask a lot for the city of Nanaimo residents, but if they know that they have one of these catch basins, clear it off with a shovel or a rake. Do not use your hands. If this gets plugged, you could ultimately flood a neighbor around the corner, flood a road, which is prone to hydroplaning. And if you're lucky enough that you have a green bin, by all means, throw the compost into the green bin. And if you don't, throw it into a composting pile. It's just gonna make a lot of the roads much more clear once we have the debris lifted off. During a snow event, the catch basin can be plugged with snow. The resident knows the proximity of the catch basin, by all means, grab a shovel or a rake, don't use your hands, and clear it off again. This is ultimately going to save you from flooding, the road, or your neighbor. You know, as much as we want help cleaning the plug catch basins off, please do not assist us by trying to unplug a culvert. Call the city yard. They have 24/7 service. It's 250-758-5222. And also there is sandbags and sand available. Just bring a shovel.
Thank you, Council. We will continue. Back to you, Ms. Manhas.
Thank you very much. So we have just one more program to review here, and this is the Hotel and Motel Revitalization Tax Exemption Program. And the purpose of this program is to encourage development and redevelopment of hotels and motels to improve the inventory of quality accommodation in the city of Nanaimo. For eligibility, it's construction or reconstruction of hotel or motel property with a building permit value of $2 million or more. How it works is that the owner enters into an agreement with the city which specifies the specific conditions. Acceptance to the program happens before the issuance of the building permit. This incentive was introduced first in 2012, and at that time we recognized that we needed further investment in this sector. The VICC was just completed and we wanted to further grow the tourism sector as well. So the intent of this program was also not only to encourage new buildings, but also to reinvigorate some of the older properties through renovations. Industry consultation at the time favored extending the programs to all of the city. And in terms of results achieved to date, we have 2 hotels that have been built, and that equals 217 rooms that have been added, as well as a bunch of ancillary amenities like restaurants, indoor pools, fitness areas, meeting rooms, etc. And the combined assessment of these 2 properties, because they're both operational now, is approximately $35 million this year, and the tax exemptions for those 2 properties equaled $204,000 in 2023. In 2026, we had the CBRE study. They projected that Nanaimo could support another hotel above and beyond what we've got with the Marriott currently. And since then, we've also seen a reduction in hotel room supply with the closure of the Howard Johnson site. We believe that there's still room and need for this program, and it can help attract investment.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, I have a question. Has anybody done reconstruction of the hotels, or has it only just been construction of new?
No renos so far. The Coast Bastion did do a renovation on their building, but it didn't, there's 2 different conditions that you need to meet. One is the investment value that we specified here, which is $2 million, but the other one is that the building has to, or the renovation value has to be at least half of what the building is worth currently. So both of those conditions need to be met for a renovation. So we are going to be making some changes on this based on what industry has told us. They basically told us that that threshold is way too high, especially for some of the small to medium properties that we have in the city of Nanaimo. So they've suggested $250,000 as opposed to $2 million. And the new builds have no issues with the $2 million. That's really nothing. You can't really build much. So that's one of the suggestions.
So will one of the suggestions be you'll have a set limit for construction, and I think $2 million is way too low, but for construction, and then reconstruction would have a different thing in the bylaw? Thank you.
Yeah, and through the chair, the challenge is that while hotels have done renovations, that amount is based on their building permit value. So in the case of the Coast, who are right now in the process of redoing all their rooms, they haven't pulled a building permit because there's no need to. So that while they're putting a substantial amount of money into the building, that investment doesn't qualify for the program. So that's the issue.
So in terms of the industry feedback that we heard, we've divided it here into new builds and renovation projects and pros and cons. In terms of new builds, the pros are that developers said that this is the program that really made the project happen. It made it viable for us to take this investment on, especially right now with the higher interest rate environment. And the other pros are it led to safety and vibrancy improvements in each of those areas. This incentive also gives Nanaimo a competitive advantage for attracting this type of investment compared to communities that don't offer these types of incentives. It also creates new employment opportunities, as we know. And the cons, there was really no cons cited for this program. For renovations, the pros, they said it's better than having nothing, but they did say the $2 million threshold is way too high. And they've suggested $250,000, which is what we will be recommending here. So areas for consideration for council in this, there's about 6 different areas that warrant discussion. Of course, the first question is going to be whether or not you want to continue with this program. The second one is around tax exemption area. So should the tax exemption area remain the same for both new builds as well as renovations? Currently, renovations and new builds, this program applies to the entire city. So in your questions, you're going to get basically, do you want to stay the same, or should we include it all over the city for renovations only? In which case, renovations will be able to take advantage of this. So existing properties, if they want to make renovations, will be able to take advantage of this program. But any new builds will only be able to take advantage of this program if they are in the downtown core. So those are the 2 options you have there. And then the minimum investment value. Industry feedback, as I mentioned quickly, they didn't have a problem with the $2 million for the new builds, but $250,000 for the renovations is what they would recommend. So you have a few options there in terms of your questions. Length of the program, again, we discussed this with the other program. It's good to have a time limit for the program because it provides clarity to the developers and urgency to take advantage of the program, so you'll get some options there, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, etc. Generally, it's a good idea to stick to the 5-year term in terms of best practices with other communities, and also we'd like to review these after 5 years to see if any changes are warranted at that time. Length and percentage of tax break, again, we had that discussion similar to the other program. We can use any type of combination in terms of the percentages we give or the number of years we give, but we would like to keep it simple for accounting purposes, etc. So you have the same options as you did for the other program. Administration of the program, again, currently we make sure that we bring it to council, but you have an option to allow that to happen at the staff level. And then extension requests, again, that's the same conversation here in terms of keeping it unlimited, 1 or 2 maximums. So this should be really easy because you guys have been through this whole process. So if there are no questions, we can
There is
launch
a question from Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Just on the renovations, is there a barrier for these businesses to do renovations that we would need to intervene to, redo rooms or whatever type of renovation is needed? Because I guess, I'm just kind of wondering, if you can't afford to renovate when you need, maybe it's just trying to maintain something where there's a shifting market and there's no longer demand for it. I'm just kind of curious the logic behind tax exemption for renovations. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. So I think the idea at the time that the program was brought in, the goal was there was a recognition that the existing hotel stock and motel stock in Nanaimo was tired and needed investment. And this program was seen as a way of encouraging owners to either build new hotels or to refurbish their existing properties. So that was kind of the goal of the program, and I don't think it's worked in terms of the refurbishment piece. And I think the owners have been pretty open about that. And of course, since that time, we've actually seen quite a few properties close. And there have been a few minor renos, but they haven't used the tax exemption program. That's been new owners who maybe have properties in other cities who have kind of a formula they use that they can come in and implement that in Nanaimo. So don't know if that answers your question.
So just like for the refurbishment, it was just recognized that hotels weren't being maintained and the city could help, do that. Like, for example, like the Tally Ho or something like that.
Yeah, like through your worship, I mean, one of the comments was it would be great if the city could give us grants to do X, Y, and Z, but you can't actually provide grants to the private property owners. So that's the challenge. That's, again, like Mr. Lindsay was mentioning before, the province specifically set this program up because it meets the criteria for, it's probably the one way you can really provide good assistance to the properties is through this program.
Right.
Now that they haven't been able to use it, so that's up to us to find a threshold that appeals to them, that works for them.
Councillor.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and a question through you to staff. So, are there ever any programs where hotel owners wish to change them into apartments, particularly hotels that have kitchenettes, things like that? Are there ever any programs or incentives where we see that turn into rental units or anything of that type?
So through the chair, we don't have a program for that per se. I mean, it's a pretty complicated process because you need to work with Mr. Holm and his team, and there's all these building code changes and stuff. It's unusual for people to do that. I mean, you can see what BC Housing has done during the pandemic when they were buying hotels.
Yes.
But those hotels will be demolished at the end of those periods of time and rebuilt as different projects. So,
okay.
Yeah, they generally don't work particularly well for residential development.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, I'm curious about what is the exemption if somebody does a renovation? Is the tax exemption on the increased value of the property based on the renovation?
Yes, it's basically the municipal portion of taxes. So for instance, for commercial properties, which is what the hotels and motels are, it's for 2023, it's 12.23 or something like that. So that's the portion that you would get an exemption on. Not all the other portions like RDN or school taxes and those kinds of things. And it's only on the value of improvement. So whatever we were collecting previously, we continue to collect that. It's only how much the assessment has gone up by because that property was improved that they get the break on.
How do you, I'm just curious about how you break that down because assessments go up every year. You would get a change in assessment based on improvement, but you would also have a change in assessment based on property values increasing anyway. So how does staff calculate that?
We keep the base value. So for instance, if it was this year that the improvements were made, it'll actually end up being the year before the occupation actually happened. So whatever the year they first get the exemption is when the property is occupied. And so the year before we look at it and they're basically paying up until then. So even if the project is complete, they're still paying up until then. As soon as occupancy occurs and BC Assessment has assessed them, then we look at what did they pay the year before and what's the difference now, and it's the difference that they're getting the tax break on. And of course that difference will continue to increase over time because property values generally increase over time. But the base value we keep from the year before.
Okay. Pretty good incentive.
Thank you. So not seeing any other questions?
Great. Thank you very much. So we will launch the poll now for this. Sorry, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the poll's closed now. To the first question, we have a majority vote of yes, continue the program. Thank you very much. And then number 2, what type of projects in tax exemption area? Again, we have a majority vote here. That's great. And number 3, should the minimum investment value be revised? And we have a majority vote here as well, 4 out of 8. However, if you guys want to have discussion on this, you're welcome to, or through the chair.
Not seeing anyone jumping in other than Councillor Perino.
Sorry, Chair. I just think that 38% and 13%, versus the 50%. I think we should have some discussion about it.
Sorry, that's for number.
Well, I'm into the 250 for renos and 3 million for new builds, and I think any kind of new build is going to be 3 million anyway. So I don't understand why you'd have the 2 million. I mean, it's going to be 3 million anyway, and.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing need for discussion on this one because it passes with the 250 for renos and 3 million for new builds. Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So moving on to question number 4, we definitely have a majority here. Thank you very much, and that's A. Number 5, we have length and percentage of tax break. And again, we have a majority here. Fantastic. And then number 6, we have a majority vote here. And number 7, can't see the results of that yet. There we go.
It's 88% for 2 maps.
Yep. Wow, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah. You guys are so good at this. One more slide. Perfect. Thank you very much. And this is our final slide, and these are basically our next steps. We're going to summarize the proposed amendments to reflect today's meeting. We're going to gather feedback from the development community on the changes. We're going to prepare amendments to bylaws and policies, and we'll return to council at a future date for introduction of the amended bylaws. Thank you so much for your time, attention, and patience today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will continue with the continuation of Municipal Development Corporation discussion to be introduced by Bill Corson, Director of Corporate and Business Development.
Thanks, Chair. Oh, sorry.
Chair, a question. In terms of there's some other items, like other areas that we could look at incentives for, is a discussion going to happen on that?
Would you,
Are you talking about incentivizing affordable housing development?
Yeah, there's affordable housing, there was sustainability things. Was that just for information, or was staff looking for discussion on that?
that was just for your information, so you can consider that and let us know if you are interested in exploring incentives on in those specific areas. And if you are interested in that, staff can come back at a future date. So it's just to gather whether you have an interest in us exploring those 5 key areas in light of the new city plan.
Okay, thank you. You know, just for commentary on that, I think, you know, we do have set a direction in our city plan, and I think it's important to explore, you know, what type of tools that we can implement to move those goals and objectives forward. So yeah, I for one would be interested in exploring some more of those items, and you know, potentially maybe it's another GPC topic down the road or not, but I'm just I wanted to voice that I'm interested.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrecht. I'm interested in this as well. Would it be helpful for council to put a motion on the floor today to provide that direction to staff? Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a motion for that would be helpful, and then we could add it to the upcoming topics coming forward as well. So if Councillor Gesselbrecht would like to make that motion and you could have discussion, we could add it to an upcoming topics.
So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Councillor Gesselbrecht, would your motion include the 5 areas of city plan that were mentioned on an earlier slide, or is it specific to affordable housing?
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure exactly how the conversation was going to be structured on that. I mean, I think there are aspects of each one that would be interesting in pursuing. I know there's already some elements under the sustainability one that are in motion and worked on, but I think it's worthwhile to go through each section and look what we could potentially do. And yeah, the costs and benefits of pursuing certain elements of it. But that, you know, that's kind of a larger ask. I haven't quite gone through it in detail to pare down exactly what I'd specifically be looking at, but the you know, the affordable housing, of course, is one area. I think there's some measures in sustainability, but also the transportation also had some interesting opportunities that would be worthwhile pursuing. So I would say all of them, but I'm not sure how staff would structure that, and you know, what type of resources we're looking at in terms of presenting something like that. So
yeah, I think through the chair we could come back with again, GPC workshop format, go through the various incentives, then come back to city plan, bring you some ideas, have a discussion with you, and then get direction to see which areas you want us to flesh out a bit more. So I think Councillor Gesselbrecht, your idea of focusing on incentives that will help implement a city plan would be a good discussion, which would cover affordable housing and sustainability and transportation.
Okay, if that direction then is suitable to staff, then we'll keep it with that.
So I'm not sure we have nailed down the specific wording of what this motion would be.
So it'd be moved for staff to bring, you know, a report and have a GPC session on incentives that could help move forward different elements within the city plan.
So specifically, an earlier slide was to incentivize affordable housing, support green infrastructure, encourage infill development, support small businesses, and prioritize active transportation.
Exactly, yeah, there's 5 different areas, and so different incentive programs that could help move the dial forward in each of those areas.
So that is the motion. Councillor Manley?
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to help clarify that. So I'm definitely in support of hearing more about different options, and I'm interested obviously in some of the green infrastructure of the brownfield sites, what we do about incentivizing development in some of those spots, affordable housing, of course. And yeah, so I'm happy to talk about all of it based on the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillors Thorpe and Councillor Armstrong. Motion carries.
Great, thanks, Chair. So what we wanted to do today was just, again, continue on our conversation about the Municipal Development Corporation. We have Mr. Nielsen online. You can join us in a minute. He was going to do just a bit of a summary for you, or a refresher on where we had got to last session. And then we put together just a few slides with just some general questions to kind of whet your appetite and help steer some conversation around the table. So that's, I'll hand it over to Mr. Nielsen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. Thank you very much. And hi, Council. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I will just outline the paper that Mr. Corson mentioned that I delivered last time to Council in October, late October, I believe. And the paper really kind of deals with the topic of municipal development corporations, of course, and it sets out a series of questions that are posed in the paper and are addressed in the paper for Council to consider. Really, some of the key points from the paper, just to list a few of them: municipal development corporations really all about development of land in a part of a community and in pursuit of a purpose or a set of goals set out by the local government that owns the corporation. It's a company, or they are companies established with share structures, and they have autonomous boards and staff who undertake the work of the corporation. They're designed to operate outside of City Hall, that is and also autonomously or with autonomy from City Hall and outside of the constraints of the processes that govern the work of and the work that's done within City Hall. Owned by municipalities, I mentioned, in this case, the City of Nanaimo, owned by a municipality, supported by a municipality in terms of providing assistance, and three kinds of types of assistance that tend to be provided to municipal development corporations: startup funding to help them get going, some initial opportunity funding, really just for a limited period of time, because these types of corporations tend to be able to pay for themselves after a short period of time. But then also another type of assistance that would be provided, or is typically provided to municipal development corporations, consists of land, city-owned land that is transferred in some fashion to the corporation. A number of places have development corporations in place, not too many in British Columbia. There's the Surrey City Development Corporation. There's some that are done in Whistler. There's some that are done in places like Chilliwack under kind of a broader economic development framework. But when we look across Canada, we do see some very useful examples. One out of Calgary, the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, and then Centre Venture, which is a City of Winnipeg corporation. And both of those corporations, like the Surrey City Development Corporation, and like the big trusts, the development trusts that are owned by the University of British Columbia and by Simon Fraser University, all of those types of municipal development corporations, or in the case of university development corporations, really look at developing or revitalizing a particular part of a municipality using city-owned land and really acting as a catalyst. And municipal development corporations, and it's very interesting because the previous discussion Council just had, of course, was to talk about different types of tools available to the City of Nanaimo to help catalyze and help bring investment into different parts of the city. And if we think of a spectrum of the types of tools to bring investment into a part of the city, a municipal development corporation is simply another tool on that broader spectrum. It's a tool that involves more investment on the part of the city to catalyze private sector investment, and also more investment in terms of time and energy to create a different corporation, to have that corporation incorporated, and to provide for a link back to the municipality. But it is, again, a tool on that broader spectrum of tools that are available to municipalities to catalyze private sector investment into different parts of a city. So well suited to the role of catalyst in bringing private sector investment to a particular defined area of the city. Really dealing with revitalization, and when we see some of the examples from across Canada, Winnipeg and Calgary in particular, we see that those development corporations have been instrumental in bringing private investment into parts of the city that were deemed to be in need of revitalization. Done when a tax incentive, as important as that is not seen as enough to bring that investment in. So this is a different way that a corporation created and owned by the municipality can assemble land, can bring lands together, can invest in lands and joint venture projects with private development companies in order to revitalize a particular part of the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. I have a question from Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I was just reading in the news that Surrey Development Corporation was disbanded by council under Mayor McCallum previously in 2020. Did they do a new one then?
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. Yes, I think it was mentioned in the paper actually that the Surrey City Development Corporation began initially in 2007, was disbanded under the previous mayor now, Mayor McCallum, and now has since been reactivated under the current council. So it's come back, it's got a slightly more focused mandate and a slightly different mandate that doesn't deal so much with making a profit for the city, but instead looks at bringing investment into specific parts of the city. So they've focused their mandate a little bit, identified the specific neighborhoods they like to bring investment into, and in which the city, using its resources and also using the land as a resource, that it's transferred over to the Development Corporation, is able to bring to the table with private sector partners. And they've also changed the board slightly. They've expanded the board a little bit to include 9 instead of 7 people.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I couldn't find it. So.
Sure, my pleasure. Madam Chair, I'll just mention the paper does just outline a few challenges that need to be taken into consideration by council in thinking about a municipal development corporation. The ability to find qualified directors is one, particularly in a city such as Nanaimo that is relatively compact and relatively small in size compared to Calgary, compared to Winnipeg and so forth. Number of people with expertise who would typically serve on this kind of board or the kind of board for a municipal development corporation may have conflicts of interest because they're also developing in the city. So the city may need to look beyond its borders and bring some others in. Some other types of challenges or considerations to be aware of: the concerns about perceived competition with private sector development, when in fact the corporation would be set up to collaborate with private sector development, but sometimes there is a perception that they're in competition. And then there's some other items that are listed in the document for council to be aware of. Madam Chair, I'll stop there. Happy to address any other points and happy to observe and participate if that's appropriate in the conversation that proceeds from this point.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, does anyone want to weigh in on this? Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 comments, Mr. Nielsen. The concern that I have is regarding this is 2 concerns. One is the lack of land that we have available for development, city-owned land. So does that make a difference with this type of corporation? Question number 1.
Sure, thank you very much. And through the chair to Councillor Perino, thank you for the question. It certainly, development corporations tend to work best when they can be capitalized with different types of resources. And often the resource, in almost every case, in fact, a resource is a certain amount of city land. And municipalities, or I beg your pardon, development corporations can also then work to acquire lands off the private market and in other ways. But there does tend to be a capitalization that is done using city lands. So if the city has a shortage of land in the areas that it most needs that private investment, that may be something for the city to consider. Ideally, we'd be in a situation where the city would acquire lands, or the city would have lands in place that it could transfer to the Development Corporation to use to leverage that private sector investment.
Okay. And the second question, Chair, is, you know, we've set up the Prosperity Corporation and certainly had difficulties getting, you know, an executive director and, you know, finding a place where it can move forward. I might not be using the right language for that, but I've just, I have not seen the success of that particular group yet. Might be too early in its days, but it's taken a long time to get to this stage, and I'm just wondering, wouldn't another one be of similar problems? And you did mention it.
Yes, thank you again through the chair to Councilor Perino. It's a very good point you raise. When we look at the Prosperity Corporation, that has a quite a different mandate than a municipal development corporation likely would have. The latter would have more of a focus mandate on bringing investment to a particular area of the city, whereas the former, the Prosperity Corporation, looks at bringing investment and also kind of generating activity in different sectors of the economy in keeping with an economic development strategy. So a little bit of a different mandate. But I think your point is a very good one in that the challenges that the city may be having with respect to finding the proper staffing and to kind of allow that corporation to take off, as it were, could very well be faced with the Municipal Development Corporation. It is the type of corporation that runs best when you bring very qualified people to the table who have a lot of experience in the private development sector, and those folks with those kinds of skills are often very busy and active in private development still. So it's sometimes difficult to kind of attract them, particularly with what may be perceived by a municipality to be an appropriate amount to pay for that kind of job. So it's a very good point you raise, a very good kind of caution to raise, because it's not at all a kind of an easy path forward in terms of staffing, in terms of attracting the right board even as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Just have a couple questions. I was looking at the Calgary one where they actually had to borrow $135 million to start funding part of the Calgary one. What will it cost us to do all this, number one? And number two, when they dissolved the Surrey one, originally it was to save $10 million, and at the time the corporation owned the city $70 million. What kind of protections are in there for the city so that we don't fall into this?
Thank you very much, and through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, very good questions. It's really depends on how it's set up and how the corporation is capitalized by the city. If the city, so if we look at the Calgary example, yes, the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, like every other corporation, does have the authority to borrow. Now, the city can always put limits on that through its articles of incorporation, but it does have the ability to borrow because the city chose to give it that ability because it needs to be able to respond quickly to different opportunities. So they've gone into, they've incurred that debt, but they also have quite a few assets the city had passed over prior to the Calgary Land Corporation acquiring that debt. So the city transferred a lot of land to that corporation, and that land has increased in value as the corporation has helped to bring investment to that area. We see the same kind of thing in Winnipeg as well, where the city passed over quite a bit of land to that corporation, and that land now has gone up in quite a bit of value. So there's a lot of assets sitting there with initially with the Municipal Development Corporation, but then passing on back to the city from the sales of lands. So there's on the Surrey City Development Corporation, on that one, that was created initially to raise money for the city. The city loaned some startup capital to that corporation and expected to return on that. It sounds like, Councillor Armstrong, you've had a look at some of the books there, and so you understand. So you've got better information than I have on kind of how much is currently outstanding. But the city is able, under all of these circumstances, to structure into, because they're dealing with a separate corporation, the city can transfer a certain amount of risk to that corporation. And the whole idea of setting up a corporation is not only to allow for an entity to operate independent of council and of the city, but also to hold some risk and not transfer that back to the city. So it is, The city can also, however, if it chose to do so, it could kind of guarantee the debts of any corporation. And that would really be a form of assistance that would be set in a partnering agreement. So the short answer, kind of to make a long story shorter, to kind of come to the point, the types of protections that the city needs to have in place, it can put in place through the Articles of Incorporation, through the partnering agreements. It can structure the proper amount of protection to give to the city, or for the city to structure into that deal, is going to depend on the city's own risk tolerance, the city's need to make a development corporation invested enough in order to do what it needs to do, and also really just the city's willingness to kind of provide the kinds of protection or kinds of assistance, excuse me, that the corporation may feel that it needs in order to really make a difference fairly quickly.
Yeah, just the thing, Calgary actually, the city of Calgary actually took out the loan. It wasn't the corporation, and they created a bylaw to give the amount to the corporation. So it was actually the city taking the risk. So that's my concern. Like, if this is to go bankrupt and we're sitting with $130 million, well, I don't know if we'd give that much, but you know, how do we recoup that? So I'm really struggling with the one because I see the pros and cons. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I don't believe I have a question, but I'll offer a couple of comments. As I did read the report, and a couple of things struck me on pages 76 and 77. One, of course, was the cost to set this up, estimated at $500,000 to $600,000 a year for 5 years, which uncomfortably reminded me of the SPO process that we recently went through. But the other thing, even more important, that struck me was on the previous page when it says, under what is the process to establish an MDC, defining the problem. The first stage is to define the problem facing the community. And my comment would be, I'm not aware of a problem facing our community that would require the help of this organization to be established. And I'm not going to put staff on the spot right now to answer that or comment, but I think before we go any further in pursuing this option, I would at some point need to hear from staff that they feel that this would be of benefit to move things forward. And I know that there's only really one area of land that we're thinking about in the back of our heads that this would apply to. So I would want to be assured that this would be a strategy that would enable that development to facilitate more easily than it would otherwise. So that's my thought right now. I see it as an expensive solution looking for a problem. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, there's a few things, like I guess, you know, to define what the benefit, like what the problem we'd be trying to address is, I think, can we accelerate the development of certain lands? And so, you know, there's two properties that jump to mind that have been in a state of needing development for quite some time. And, you know, one, we, you know, went out to ROI and didn't really receive the responses that we, we went out to ROI and it didn't really move forward. And I think asking the question, could this entity allow for just more attention and a greater array of relationships that can be engaged in to be able to develop these sites and do things that we may not be able to do specifically, you know, with our current city structure, and just have more, you know, our development that we currently have are being managed by, you know, the CAO and directors that have, you know, a whole other series of portfolios that they have to pay attention to, and a much broader array of expertise. If we had more focus on the development of these properties, would we see things happen quicker in ways that we'd want to see them? And that's a difficult question to answer. I think, there has been a certain amount of time that has elapsed where, things maybe could be done a little bit quicker. There's also very complex relationships that maybe not. And also, I think because there isn't a whole ton of properties right now in the portfolio, and that can grow. I'm looking at the last attachment from the last thing on incentives, and there's quite a lot of properties in the downtown that are undeveloped. That portfolio could grow, but seeing the movement forward where we want to see it, the question in my mind is the time and effort taking to set up this development corporation, would that exceed the time that we'd see realistically some movement on these properties? And that I don't know. There's a little bit of fear now put in anything about just getting the right directors and the right people to actually run it. Where can we internally beef up the staff and attention on these areas to move them forward quicker, but would we be constrained by just the type of relationships we can engage in as a municipality compared to what a development corp is? So I think that there is potential, and I would support moving it forward. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts currently at the moment.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I've been giving this a lot of thought, doing lots of research, and at this time I can't support this. We're already looking at a significant tax increase. To add another 0.5% tax increase for something that I don't think is going to do anything that our staff isn't already doing for 2 pieces of property, and we are starting to move on one of the pieces of property, and I believe also the second one. We're taking on risk that the private industry doesn't want to, and I think that's wrong. If private companies want to build here, they're going to build. I think the incentives that we're doing are going to help. I mean, if these are so great, you'd think there'd be many, many more cities jumping on board, and they're not. Some are actually getting rid of them, as we read. Surrey did bring it back, but in a much more limited area. So I don't think now is the time to do this. Just as Councillor Thorpe mentioned, with the SPO, and if you add this, that's a 1% tax increase. And our citizens are not able to afford a lot of this stuff. Our user rates went up significantly. So at this particular time, I can't support doing this because I believe our staff is doing a great job of bringing people in, and they are moving on the one plan. Thank you.
Not seeing any other speakers on this. For myself, I think I would be really interested in seeing what a development corporation would give us the ability to do. The problem as I see it is we've got some significant holes in the ground, and we also have a serious lack of affordable rentals, and developers aren't coming to the table to build those in the same way that the city could. So for me, seeing something like the Prosperity Corporation, I think it would be better served to have a development corporation, because they can actually help us move some of these projects forward in a tangible way. Mr. Nielsen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to speak, but I did want to kind of comment on a couple of the points that have been made thus far, because Council has made some really important points. I think that and perhaps picking up on Councillor Thorpe's comments and Councillor Gieselbrock's comments as well, and Councillor Armstrong's comments, I think that this type of intervention, really, because that's what a municipal development corporation is a municipality deciding that it wants to play through a company it sets up more of a direct role in this kind of in the development of a particular part of the city. I think that it's something for Council, if I can put it this way, to consider if there's an area of the city that is in critical need of investment, and that it's been and that other tools used by the city, whether that be kind of the current staffing arrangement that supports property development at the city and property assembly and so forth, or whether it's tax exemptions or other types of tools. If those other types of tools have been insufficient or inadequate in being able to attract investment to those places, or that critical place that's in need of investment, I think that another reason that the city would want to consider it is if this particular type of corporation could do something that the city couldn't do. But also, as Councillor Armstrong pointed out too, it's the kind of thing to consider if the city is not only facing the need for a tool, or not only has the need for a tool to achieve something that the city has been unable to achieve, i.e. investment in a particular part of town using other tools, but also has a tolerance to take on some risk and to transfer city assets and including funds, but also lands, to a different entity to achieve some of the purposes set out. So those are big. Those are big kind of barriers, if you will. It's a high bar to meet, and I think going back to Councillor Thorpe's comments, that clear definition of a problem, I think, is the first point to determine whether this is the type of thing the council would wish to consider.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Yeah, we're seeing sort of, just with the discussion with the incentive program, there is some investment happening in the downtown. We're not quite sure if it's if it's picking up, or if through effort we've kind of gotten some bites and there's promise, but nobody's saying like, oh, things are going great. It's sort of medium. And looking at, with Sandstone, a whole nother big area being opened up. And then all the area in the north end is just, we've got this spread out situation again where the investment is diluted and not directed. And I don't think we've done anything on a larger scale to allow for more of a concentrated focus on the downtown. And I don't think we're moving into a context where that's going to happen. I don't think with higher interest rates that's going to be a barrier, and with these other probably easier areas to develop in, that's more greenfield. And so I think that it's going to be ongoing, and without more intention and effort on our part, we're not going to see the things that we would like. My question is to Mr. Nielsen, staff, is like, I think, with our current council and like the newness of this and what would actually entail and the risk involved, I think what realistically would be the next step, without saying, giving the direction, let's go and do this, set up a development corporation? Is there another interim step that we need to investigate further to get more numbers on things, or basically are we at a junction where we just need to decide?
Sorry, Chair, through Chair. I think and Mr. Nielsen can follow me up with his advice afterwards, but my consideration would be that back in 2019 we had a good conversation with you about key site redevelopment in the downtown. That was something that was really important to you, and identifying those key sites that you wanted to see brought forward. We could have a session with you about which areas of the city are you interested in, because in order to have that conversation, then we need to understand who owns that land and what plans they have for those properties. And back to Councillor Gesselbrock's point, is there an incentive they need to move forward? Or is it just that they're never going to develop the property? And I think you took you took action on the Gene Burns property where you realized that site was really critical and you wanted to move it forward, and you as a municipality were able to buy that site. As a development corporation, you wouldn't have been able to have done that because you wouldn't have the tools that you have as a municipality to bring those sites forward. So a development corporation will be able to go negotiate with people and to buy property, but they won't have the additional tools that you have to acquire that land. Now, you might want to do that and then transfer those lands to a development corporation. That's certainly something you could do. But I think from a staff level, back to Councillor Thorpe's point, it would be good to understand what we're trying to achieve. And is it about getting vacant sites in the downtown core repopulated, or is it more like Councillor Eastmer's concern about creating more rental housing? I think that's kind of the conversation to get a consensus around what the challenge is. Yeah.
Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for the presentation and the work of staff so far on this. When I first considered the concept of a municipal development corporation, it sounded good. Why wouldn't it? I mean, everybody else is making money in real estate and, you know, revitalizing various areas. It just seems like a really good idea. But with respect, having read Mr. Nielsen's report, having seen what the commentary is about other communities where they've undertaken it and how they've used it, I don't think we really fit into any of those places where it's been successful. Dave Whitty has made a very strong pitch in the past, for instance, around Winnipeg. Well, then I'm Winnipeg. There's clearly not much consensus, and I'm not sensing it around this table about what it would be for. Do you want to develop housing? Well, with great respect, I'm not anxious to see the city getting into developing housing, which would presumably be designed to provide housing for those who can't afford the market. That's the province's job, and once you're in that field, I mean, how are you going to make money, so to speak, to buy more land, to provide more housing? It becomes problematic in its own. In terms of the sites, you know, the problematic site that Mr. Corson referred to, Old Gene Burns site, I mean, there's a reason that we're not getting as much interest as we should in that, because the costs are going to be significant. And the last thing I want to see is public dollars poured into acquiring sites which are highly problematic. That's the reason why the private sector isn't buying and developing them. So I just don't, I'm not saying no forever. Things do change, but I can't see any significant advantage to this. And moreover, as Mr. Nielsen pointed out, attracting the kind of talent you want to make this successful, that's going to be a very expensive proposition. It should be a separate entity because it has to be nimble. With great respect, municipal governments by their nature are not nimble until it comes to a time of crisis and war. That's really what it amounts to. Then you'll mobilize things, you'll use all your authority, etc. But we are not developers. We are not nimble when it comes to this stuff. Notwithstanding the good work of staff and the fine things they've done over time, we're not going to be able to respond in the way on behalf of the people who pay the taxes and support the city and vote for us in a way that might make this really successful. So for the time being, I'm certainly not prepared to support us moving ahead on this or interested in spending more staff time considering it. I haven't heard anything today that's moved me, and if someone else can say something that will, that's great. I'm always ready to change my mind in light of good argument or new facts or information, but right now I'm not hearing or seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other members of council wanting to speak, so thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you.
Mr. Corson, anything else to add?
No, Chair. I think it's an information-only report, so no direction. We will put our tools down in the moment on this file.
Yes, not seeing any questions, so yes, motion for adjournment. Councilor Armstrong, seconded Councilor Perino. All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.